Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to this 3-part series featuring the first villainess I'd ever seen, Katarina Clays. This story has everything we've come to know and love about villainesses in anime manga media, such as being a nerdy loser gamer who played dating sims in real life, getting killed by Truck-kun, and reincarnating in their favorite dating sim, where all the hot guys want to date her. What's Katarina's quirk? She's really nice and stupid. You can watch your whole series from the beginning to catch yourself up to the new part, or skip to this timestamp here. Anyways, hype up the video or I'm never making one again. We begin the story with the spoiled brat that is Katarina Klaus. She screams at her maids, telling them she'd prefer a pink bow over the blue one she's wearing, even though she's the one who had originally picked the blue bow to wear in the first place. But she still has the audacity to threaten firing all of her maids. She's the daughter and only child of a wealthy duke, Luigi Klaus, who instantly garners the affection of his daughter. Duke Klaus introduces Katarina to Giordo Stewart, the third prince of the kingdom, to which she graciously bows when meeting him. When Giordo returns the greeting, Katarina's eyes sparkle like it's love at first sight. The two take a stroll through the garden, with Katarina holding on to the prince's arms while feigning that her feet hurt, which is why she can't walk on her own. They spot Giordo's twin brother, Alan, who scoffs when he notices the two staring at him. Katarina wonders why Alan is so rude, and comments on how they look nothing alike. Giordo responds that people say that all the time. He then walks away from Katarina, and when she goes after him, she trips. Another life flashes in her mind, a young baby girl, the youngest in her family. A girl who would grow up to rambunctiously climb the trees. A girl who would hate getting chased by dogs in the morning. A girl who would stay up all night playing video games. That same girl was Katarina Klaus in her previous life. Katarina awakens with a bloody forehead, and people concerned, asking if she's okay. But all she could think about is her final memory as a high school girl, the night she stayed up late playing otome games. The morning that followed, where she rushed out the door late to school and met her demise at the age of 17. The huge influx of memories hits her and causes her to faint. A few days later, back at the mansion, Katarina has made a full recovery, and even though the prince blames himself for walking away and making her fall, Katarina took the blame on herself for making everyone worry, which caused Giordo and the maid to become shocked. But what was even more shocking to them was the daughter of a duke peeling off her band-aid and being so unworried about the blemish on her forehead. Giordo tells Katarina even if she's carefree, high society won't feel the same, causing her to roll her eyes and think about how constricting and annoying it is to be in a noble family compared to her previous life. The next thing she hears, however, is the prince asking if that would be alright. She quickly responds, yes, pretending as if she had heard exactly what the prince had been saying the entire time. The prince then takes his leave and tells her he'll be back to present himself, but she has no idea what he means by present. But when the maid congratulates Katarina, she realizes she fucked up because she accidentally accepted Prince Giordo's marriage proposal. Katarina tries explaining to her parents that the prince simply felt responsible for causing her injury, but the parents ignore what she's saying to congratulate their daughter for catching the eyes of the prince. Katarina falls on her bed, unsure of what to do next. Because even though Giordo is a nice guy, she doesn't feel attracted to the 8-year-old boy. After all, she's a 17-year-old otaku on the inside. She sighs, but then suddenly remembers the life she's experiencing is similar to an ultimate game she had beaten. In the game, Prince Giordo was black-hearted and sadistic, but wore a beautiful smile, and the evil rich girl he was engaged to blamed him for the wound on her forehead. And she screams when she remembers the evil rich girl in the story was none other than who she is today, Katarina Klaus. She heads to her desk, trying to recall everything she can about the game they're in called Fortune Lover, a dating sim set in a magic academy, the main heroine being Maria, a commoner with light magic who enters the academy at the age of 15, where she meets the 4 love interests. Prince Giordo, his twin brother Alan, then Keith Klaus, Katarina's adopted brother, and the son of the Prime Minister, Nicole Ascot. The main villainess being Giordo's fiancée, Katarina Klaus. In the good ending of Giordo's route, Katarina tortures Maria constantly. She eventually gets stripped of her rank and exiled, while Maria gets engaged happily to Giordo. In the bad ending of Giordo's route, Katarina attacks Maria with a knife, but gets killed by Giordo, who decides to protect Maria. With him having murdered his fiancée, he breaks up with Maria and flees the country. The more she researches, the more Katarina is convinced this is the world of Fortune Lover, meaning all routes lead to doom. Inside Katarina's mind, she consults with herself on how to avoid the impending doom. Fearless Rina suggests calling her engagement off, but spineless Rina feels bad for dumping Giordo. Happy Rina suggests not going to the Magic Academy. However, studious Rina says it's the duty of all those who possess magic to attend the Magic Academy. She then plays a projector, showing Katarina having manifested her earth magic at the age of 5, making a little bump in the ground. Studious Rina then says it would probably be easy to just not bully the game's heroine. But even so, spineless Rina thinks they could still be framed to be the evil mastermind. After all, Giordo is a black-hearted prince who wears the facade of an angel. Spineless Rina thinks it's possible he might vilify her so he can end up with the heroine. With her schizo thoughts unsure of what to do, fearless Rina tells them she just has to boost her swordsmanship and magic power so she can fend for herself. And with her skills, even if she's exiled, she won't have any trouble finding work. She began executing her plan with sword training, and everyone takes notice of how strange Katarina's been acting post-injury. She learned from a book that in order to boost magic ability, it's important to converse with the source of one's magic. She picked up gardening, even though her maid has no idea what the fuck is going on. Prince Giordo, his parents, and Katarina's mother walk in on her, causing Katarina to stand back, a little embarrassed. But the sight of Katarina embarrasses her mother even more and causes her to faint. Giordo walks over and Katarina explains once again that she's trying to converse with the earth. This almost causes the prince to break out in laughter, but he maintains his composure and commends her for her unique method of training. Rina is happy that he isn't mad at her, relieved that she isn't going to be exiled. While she's distracted, Giordo gets on one knee and asks her to accept his marriage proposal. So of course, she unknowingly accepts it because she wasn't paying attention. Night falls, and Katarina sits by herself, thinking how this is all turning out just like the game, with all endings being bad for her. She just doesn't want to die young again. She gets called by her father, who introduces her new adopted brother, Keith, the second Doom Flag. Keith is actually a distant relative of their family, who lived a lonely life, constantly being bullied by his siblings for being the son of a mistress. In the original story, after the Klaus family takes him in, Katarina bullied him just as harshly. To bury the pain, he grows up to be a playboy, until he meets the game's heroine, who cures his loneliness and makes him truly fall in love. But when Katarina interferes with that, her endings are getting exiled or killed with magic. Rina has another meeting in her mind, saying there's no choice but to put Keith in a box and dump him under a bridge. But studious Rina uses her senses to tell them that if they make sure he doesn't feel lonely, he'll never have the need for the heroine to fill his loneliness, thus preventing another doom flag for Rina. She heads into Keith's room to show him around the garden and tells him to call her big sister, even though in their noble dynamic, it would technically be considered very rude. They head out to the garden, where Rina proudly shows off her eggplants and tomatoes she planted. She then takes his hand, causing Keith to blush as they run to the next area, a giant tree where Rina says the view from the top is truly the best. Katarina then begins to scale the tree, which she is quite skilled at since in her previous life everyone had called her a wild monkey. However, she slipped and fell on Keith, screaming and telling him not to die, that she finally got to have a cute little brother and was upset that she killed him with her butt. But of course, he was perfectly fine. Later, Prince Giordo says he's surprised to hear that Rina fell from a tree, causing him to almost break out in laughter over her silliness. Giordo notices Rina's parents seeming more loving than usual, so Rina explains with Keith's introduction, her mother thought that Keith was her father's illegitimate son, and they almost got a divorce over this. But since the misunderstanding was cleared, they've been overly affectionate towards each other. After sword training, Rina has her brother show off some of his earth magic. He makes a dirt doll dance, but all Rina sees is money in her eyes, because if she could make dirt dolls, it would be a cheap form of labor that she can use in case she gets exiled. She asks Keith to teach her how to make dirt dolls, and with sparkles in her eyes, Keith reluctantly says yes. He then summons a giant earth doll, and with excitement, Rina runs towards it. Keith tries to stop her, but it's too late as the doll knocks her out. She wakes up to her worried parents, who ask if she's alright. Rina's father then explains that Keith has powerful magic that once injured his siblings because it went out of control. This is why Keith promised he wouldn't use his magic for no reason. Keith took all the blame for himself for hurting Rina, but Rina explains that it was all her fault for talking him into using it. She jumps out of the bed because she feels obligated to apologize. She then eventually reaches her servants and learns that Keith locked himself in his room. She knocks on his door, but to no avail. Keith tells her he can't let himself get close to her. He flashes back to a time where his brother shoved him to the ground and started throwing stones at a bird's nest he was watching. Completely distraught, he unleashed an explosive earth magic that injured his siblings, leading his family to eventually reject him. With the painful memories in mind, Keith tells himself as long as he's alone, he can't hurt anyone. He then opens his eyes when Rina calls his name. She begins chopping down the door with an axe, and once she gets inside, she bows and apologizes for making him use his magic. Keith tries to blame himself again, but Rina grasps his hands and tells him he just needs to start training so he can control his magic. She then tells him they'll always be together, causing him to cry and thank her for her kind words. But it's not a complete happy ending, since Rina's mom is ready to punish her for chopping down the door. It's another beautiful day for Rina to work on her harvest. With it now being a few months since her memories from her past life came back, taking care of the fields has become a hobby of hers. She becomes saddened to see her plants wilting, even with the water and fertilizer. So Keith and Jordo try to console her, only to realize they might both be love rivals. But Rina is none the wiser, thinking the two have just become really good friends. We move to dinner time, where Duke Klaus explains Rina has been invited to a prestigious tea party. However, Duchess Klaus gets out of her chair to say Rina shouldn't go because she eats like a disgusting pig. Duke Klaus then suggests Keith go with Rina, since Rina needs the experience and Keith can keep an eye on her. But Rina wonders why she's being babysat if she is the older sister, as she continues to munch like a cow feeding on hay. The next day, we transition to Rina and Keith being greeted by the 4 Hunt sisters at the entrance to the tea party. The youngest daughter, Mary Hunt, greets them with a soft and meek voice. And when Rina greets her back, Mary moves behind her older sisters. At the tea party, all the girls fawn over Katerina, who is famous for being engaged to the prince. She breaks away exhausted from all the greetings, but notices the desserts untouched, so she starts to have a little snack. Keith appears, wondering why she's so lost in thought, and catches her red-handed because he knows she's thinking of taking all the desserts home. Poor Rina was forbidden from eating any sweets after the one time she had eaten one right off the floor in front of her mother because of the 5-second rule. And with Keith scolding her, she proclaims she has no choice but to eat them all now. So she starts to viciously munch down on the desserts like she's never heard of diabetes. However, this comes back to bite her, since she ends up with stomach pain and has to run to the bathroom. Leaving the restroom, she stumbles upon a beautiful flower garden and spots Mary smelling a rose by herself. Rina asks what she's doing out here alone, so Mary tells her she doesn't like crowded places very much. Rina thinks that Mary seems afraid right now and pinches herself, wondering if her face is a little too scary. To keep up the conversation, Rina remarks on how beautiful the garden is, and asks Mary to introduce her gardener to her. To Rina's surprise, however, Mary tends to all the flowers here, causing Rina to latch onto Mary, asking what her secret is. But Mary doesn't handle her personal space being invaded too well, so Rina backs away when she sees Mary on the verge of tears. Rina then explains she was excited because she wanted some advice on how to tend to her dying plants, and invites Mary over to her house to check out her garden. On another day, Mary meets with Rina in her farming area with her dying plants. Mary then pulls out a book and suggests moving the plants to a place where they can receive even more water and fertilizer. They begin to replant, water, and spend their time together until they eventually see the plants become much healthier over time. The two become the best of friends, with Rina praising Mary for her having a green thumb. And even with the plants nursed back to health, Rina invites Mary to visit anytime. After Mary leaves, Keith says he's glad Rina was able to cheer her up. He had overheard at the tea party that Mary's mother was Marquess Hunt's second wife, and because of that, the 3 older sisters would verbally abuse Mary all the time. Mary's mother would eventually pass away too, leaving her with no place to feel like she belonged. Keith also mentions Mary's engagement to Jordo's twin brother, Alan, which gives Rina PTSD flashbacks of the 3rd Dune flag. Alan, spending his life with a deep rivalry and inferiority complex toward his brother Jordo. On his route, he eventually meets the heroine, which lightens his heart and improves his relationship with Jordo. Katerina hardly appears in this route at all because Mary takes over as the love rival instead. In the happy ending, Mary congratulates the couple and leaves, while in the bad ending, she just ends up with Alan, which isn't bad in any way, causing Rina to feel jealous that she's the only one destined for tragedies. However, this isn't for certain, since the garden event had Alan instead of Rina saying Mary had a green thumb and praising her gardening skills. Although, Rina can't help but wonder if she ruined Mary's chance to fall for Alan. Over tea, Rina congratulates Mary for getting engaged, and Mary is happy to be engaged to her prince, just like Rina. Unfortunately, the congratulations turned to shock when Rina realized Mary was so happy when Rina told her she had a green thumb. Mary ended up telling Alan what Rina had said to her, leaving no opportunity to drop his signature line at all. The next day, when tending to her garden, a maid lets Rina know Prince Alan has shown up suddenly to visit her. She greets him, only to get the stink eye in return. Alan then shouts at Rina, telling her to stop seducing his fiancée. Rina has no clue what he means, so Alan explains that he invited his girl over, but Mary canceled on him because she already had plans with Katerina, and Katerina is the only thing she ever talks about. Rina denies the seducing accusations, and tells Alan any girl would accept the invite of a guy she actually likes, so he must be boring as fuck. He takes the insult as a personal challenge to a showdown. The two decide to have a tree climbing contest, where the first one to reach the top wins. The match begins and Alan's jaw drops when he sees Rina blitz her way up to the top. Alan demands a rematch, but even as the day turns to evening, he shows no chance of ever beating her. Then he runs away to challenge her on another day. He would suddenly barge into Rina's house, challenging her day after day, losing more climbing contests and even sword matches, all while Rina would win flawlessly while swinging like a monkey. Prince Jordo would begin to take notice of Alan's daily challenges and sees Alan beginning to seem like he was having fun. One day, he came for a challenge only to see Jordo spending time with her already. Jordo reminded Alan he'd been losing daily and wondered when he was going to give up, but Alan was determined. So Rina suggested that they battle out their piano skills. Rina performed well, however, Alan played at a more advanced level, enough to make Rina blush. Everyone began to clap, and Rina congratulated him for playing the song much better than she had. But sadly, none of the compliments were effective, because Alan felt on the inside everyone thought of him as a worthless failure. He runs off, and Rina finds him sitting beneath a tree. He explains he feels like his talents are meaningless in comparison to Jordo, and explains he's been compared to his brother since the day he was born. All he's ever been told was that he was the dregs left behind after Jordo took all the good qualities. However, Rina explains that Jordo has things he's good at and things he's bad at, and that he isn't perfect. Everyone has flaws. But Alan has never heard of Jordo not having things he couldn't handle. Rina gives an evil smirk and reveals Jordo's secret fear of snakes. She takes Alan behind a bush as they hear Jordo looking for them, and she then tosses her toy snake at Jordo to give him a little scare. But then Jordo finds the two, uttering Katerina's name, saying there's no way she'd throw a toy snake at her fiancé, and then he walks off to go tell her mom about the tree climbing and the toy, which makes her chase after him, begging Jordo not to tell on her, all while giving Alan a good laugh. Another day begins with Rina enjoying her favorite romance novel, Sophia and the Emerald Princess. It's a tale about a friendship between a princess and a commoner. As she lies in bed, she wonders why her favorite story is considered lowbrow reading in noble society, and she reminisces on all the time she spent immersed reading manga in her previous life, wishing she had someone to talk to about this passion for good stories. Like I wish you'd hit that subscribe button and like this video, because I've got a passion for good shoujo stories in anime, manga, and manhwa. And the more subscribers I get, the more I get to share my favorite stories with you. I'd appreciate it. Rina gets an invite to a tea party being hosted by Giordo's family, and she's determined to find a romance novel buddy there. On the day of the party, Alan teases Giordo about the toy snake thing and laughs thinking about the scared face Giordo makes when seeing snakes. Giordo reminds Alan that Rina is his fiancée, and even though Alan doesn't think much of it, Giordo walks away saying he has no intention of losing Rina to his twin brother. The party begins and Rina can't help but stuff her face with zero remorse. She takes a sip of tea and makes an excuse to head to the bathroom because she's hit her limit. On the way to the restroom, she spots a dog, and remember, she has a big fear of them. A dog chases after her, with her screaming until she evades it by climbing up a tree. We then hear from below the other kids harassing the girl with the white hair, but all Rina can think about is if she jumps down now, the other kids might tell her parents she was climbing trees. But she can't hold it in any longer, and she decides to jump down, telling them all to kindly get out of the way, which scares the kids into running, but that wasn't her intention at all. However, when Rina sees the girl with the white hair up close, she thinks of how beautiful she is, but dips out quickly because she needs to use the restroom badly. Rina eventually heads back to the party to continue her ravaging of the desserts, but then the girl with white hair appears. Rina thinks this girl is like the white-haired Sophie from her favorite novel, that the princess would often sneak out to visit. She recites the princess's lines when she says, "Your hair is as lovely as silk." Then Rina tries to touch the girl's hair. The girl mentions the Emerald Princess, getting Rina into a frantic excitement, having potentially found her reading buddy. Unfortunately, the excitement ends when Keith tells them the tea party is over. So Rina invites the girl over to her house as she gets pulled away. Later at the Klaus Manor, Rina excitedly rushes to meet her new reading friend, but is also shocked to find the girl had brought her beautiful brother as well. The boy thanks Rina for inviting his sister to play, and then he introduces himself as Nicole Ascart. After greeting him back, Rina realizes Nicole's the fourth Doom Flag. He's the son of the Prime Minister and childhood friends with Jordo and Alan, but also not super talkative. Her conscience explains that Rina had never played Nicole's route before, but she learned from her friend Achan that Nicole has a sister complex, so the in-game rival ends up being the younger sister Sophia, which is good news since Katarina never appears in Nicole's route, so Rina can enjoy her time with her new reading buddy to the fullest extent. As Rina and Sophia bond over books, Nicole observes them from afar. Eventually, Sophia gets called to go home, and when she stands up, Rina catches a glimpse at her beautiful hair and asks to touch it. Sophia doesn't answer at first, and this makes Rina wonder if she's being a little too forward. However, Sophia doesn't understand Rina. Everyone has told her she has white hair like a grandma and bloody eyes that make her look like a creepy cursed child. Nicole interjects, calling what the haters said about his sister as slander, all because the other adults were jealous of the power and influence the Ascart family held. They began insulting the youngest daughter. Unfortunately, Sophia took their words to heart. But to Rina, Sophia's white hair is as beautiful as silk, and red eyes twinkle like rubies, and truly desired for Sophia to be friends with her. These words brought Sophia tears of joy. On the way home, Sophia was happy that the words her brother had told her family finally came true. He had always said one day she'd find a friend who accepts and understands her. This made Nicole happy as well. Later, the Klaus siblings would eventually be invited to the Ascart household. Upon meeting the parents, Rina found it no surprise that they were beautiful as well. The parents thanked Rina for befriending their daughter because she looked much happier these days. And as the two girls hung out, Nicole and Keith would observe them. Eventually, the hangout would come to an end, and Sophia would run back to her room to retrieve a book she wanted to lend to Rina. This made Rina think of her old friend Achan, who read manga, watched anime, and played otome games with her. Nicole then thanked Rina for spending time with his sister, but Rina is just as grateful that he and his parents have been so nice to her, and remarks how lovely his parents are, telling him he was truly blessed to have such a wonderful family. This made Nicole smile, and this gorgeous smile made Rina blush. Sophia then finally comes back with a book, but when Rina looks over at Keith, she wonders if he's also been ensnared by Nicole's charms as well. On the way home, Rina thinks about how to protect Keith from Nicole, all while Keith thinks of how he has another love rival. 7 years pass, and Rina is now 15 years old. She reflects on everything she did to avoid all the Doom Flags, although she unfortunately didn't have much magic talent. She is first greeted by Jordo, who wishes her a happy birthday, and then the rest of the friends walk up to do the same. Jordo gets the first dance with Rina, and tells her he has no intention of ending their engagement. But even if he fell for someone else, Rina would be okay with it. Jordo realizes she's too dense and has no idea how strongly he feels for her. Then he pulls her in and tells her like this he can take her at any time. He then goes for a light kiss on her neck. However, Rina couldn't tell what it was. He then says that's all he'll do for now, and then takes his leave. Keith then walks over to wipe it off, telling her it was a bug, with the completely dense Rina thanking him and being none the wiser of what he was actually wiping. Nicole then asks for the next dance, and as they move, the crowd stares at them in awe. But little do they know, Rina finds it awkward that Nicole goes completely silent during conversation. She then asks if there's anyone he's interested in, to which he answers there is, but it's really someone he shouldn't have feelings for, leaving Rina wondering if it's someone's wife or another guy. She then gets some time to herself outside, where Maria and Sophia are eager to dance with her too. And even though it's getting a little weird, Rina is willing to let them take turns. So they dance the night away, with Rina having enjoyed her time before her days at the academy begin. The day would eventually come where Rena and Keith got a farewell from their parents before heading to school. While Duke Klaus was proud and teary-eyed, the Duchess couldn't help but scold Rena, telling her not to be a slob. The two siblings would begin their carriage journey, with Rena eventually making it to the school gates, where the game Fortune Lover canonically begins. Inside her dorm, she thinks of the heroine, remembering that with a school full of nobles, Maria will be the only commoner enrolled, and on top of that, possessing the exceedingly rare light magic. Rena's conscience begins to discuss how things are going to play out, because she knows Rena's relationships with the 4 boys will determine whether she lives or dies. With Jordo, even though he originally proposed to Rena to take responsibility for her scar, he refuses to end their engagement, telling her, nope, it's definitely still there. Keith ended up not being a playboy thanks to all of Rena's efforts to spend time with him. However, now that he's grown, many girls find him handsome, so he's unconsciously turning into a playboy. Alan got rid of his inferiority complex and developed his music talent. But unlike the game, his fiancée Mary doesn't seem attracted to him. And lastly, there's Nicole, who remains silent and expressionless. However, Rena has become great friends with his sister, Sophia, so how fate will change for all of them has yet to be seen. At the entrance ceremony, as the principal gives his speech, Rena looks amongst the students hoping to see Maria. Giordo asks what's wrong, but Rena says everything's fine, so he invites her to eat sweets in his dorm afterwards. Rena meets Giordo at his dorm, with Keith, who Giordo isn't too happy to see. Rena then begins digging into the sweets, but chokes when she hears that Giordo walked a lost girl with light magic to her dorm. She recalls the in-game event where Maria tries to climb up a tree in order to find her dorm, and Giordo meets her for the first time. And Rena can't help but feel the events are unfolding the same. Thinking Giordo will fall in love with Maria pretty soon, Keith thinks it's interesting that there's another girl who climbs trees just like Rena. However, this event didn't surprise Giordo much since he's used to it by now, and he's always found Rena's tomboy attitude very charming. Rena is losing her shit because the route Giordo and Maria date is the route she dies. She lies in bed, unable to sleep, thinking she can't let her guard down. Giordo's fate on her mind constantly. On their first day of school, Keith mentions he also met the girl with light magic recently, which causes Rena to freak out. She remembers he and Maria meet when he tries to hit on her. Rena grabs Keith asking if he's flirting with a new girl. This causes him to blush, but he says he would never do something like that. He then explains he met her by picking up the handkerchief she dropped, which Rena remembers happened in the game as well, plus some flirting. Rena then asks Keith if he fell in love with the girl, causing him to get flustered again, and Rena thinking she's got it all figured out. She tells him she won't get in their way and shakes him, cheering them on. But I'm pretty sure this isn't how he feels at all. Inside the halls, Rena crosses paths with a blonde-haired girl. The two exchange glances, and without a doubt, this girl is the heroine, Maria Campbell. And during class, Rena gets so distracted by Maria, the teacher has to tell her to focus on the lecture, and she's so distracted, even on the way home, Rena's friends notice something's bothering her. Rena thinks this is no time to get careless. Maria will soon charm all the boys. Her conscience panics, thinking she's on the route to doom, but studious Rena comes up with a plan to start farming, because if they get exiled, at least they can get by with their farming skills. So she gets permission from the school to start a flower garden, but she didn't tell them she'd be growing vegetable crops instead. And when her group of friends finds her, Alan starts to burst out in laughter over how ridiculous Rena is being. At the exam ranking board, Rena spots the top placings. All the top-ranked students must join the student council. She sees first Giordo, second Maria, and third Alan. Alan appears, and we learn that he's supposed to fall for Maria after she tops his score, which is supposed to make him mad. When Rena asks how he feels about coming in third place, he isn't bothered by it. He thinks of when Rena once told him everyone has things they're good at and things they're bad at. Later, at the student council office, she gets served tea by the council president, Sirius Deke. Rena asks why Sirius and Nicole are the only second-year students in the council, and Sirius explains his classmates left after fighting over Nicole all the time, making Rena sweat thinking of his devilish charm. The next person to greet Rena is Maria herself, with a plate of sweets as well. As they enjoyed tea time together, Rena asks if Maria ever brings the sweets she makes personally to school, causing Maria to look down in complete silence. Maria asks how Rena knows she makes sweets, but she can't say from the game, of course, so Rena makes the excuse that the cafeteria ladies told her. Maria buys this excuse and then says she doesn't know if her sweets will be good enough for their friends to enjoy. But Rina is ecstatic to have homemade sweets and convinces Maria to make her some. On the way home, Rina smells something delicious and walks over to some bushes. She finds some girls harassing Maria, saying her cheap commoner snacks aren't worthy enough to be served to the student council. One of the bullies goes to step on the desserts, and Rina comes to the rescue, getting enraged that the homemade sweets are being ruined. This scares the other girls off, reminding us that having the face of a villain really pays off sometimes. Rina looks at the snacks on the ground. Old habits never die, as she picks up and starts to eat, standing up with her face covered in food. Maria looks at her, and Rina screams in her mind because she accidentally ate all the snacks. But Maria doesn't really mind though. It's just that all the food was on the ground. Rina ignores this to praise Maria on her professional level dessert skills, making her smile. During her gardening time, Rina remembers she was actually the one who bullied Maria during that in-game event, and Jordo was originally the one who defended Maria and ate her sweets off the ground, meaning Rina inadvertently prevented Jordo's relationship with Maria from progressing, thus saving herself from a route of doom. The next day, Rina has a study session with Maria. She constantly needs help because she's actually stupid and consistently scores below average, with the notable rank of 88 amongst the first-year students. Maria offers to help anytime and hands a plate of delicious snacks to Rina. Upon eating them, Rina thinks of how all their friends also enjoy Maria's delicious treats, as she has a real knack for making confectionaries. Sirius then serves tea for the two girls to enjoy, and Rita remarks how she's surprised he's from the prestigious Deke family, and that he is the current #1 ranked student among all the second years, even having a larger fan base than Nicole's. Later in the hallway, as Rina walks, she greets Maria. Maria doesn't acknowledge anything, leading Rina to believe she must be getting bullied, that she needs to help Maria make friends. Rina later asks her brother for advice on how she can become better friends with Maria, and he suggests they spend more time with Maria outside of the student council office. During lunchtime, Rina decides to search for Maria at her usual in-game lunch place, and sees her being bullied by the other girls. One of the girls is about to strike Maria with fire, so Rina uses her earth bump to knock the girl over. She then runs over to defend Maria, telling the girls they need to stop their bullying just because they're jealous of her academic talents. She basically tells them to fuck off, scaring the girls into running away. Rina then turns back to Maria, who is in tears of joy because she finally has a friend who will treat her well, and begs Rina to call her Maria without any honorifics. Later at night, Rina ponders why the bullies would go so far as to using magic to harm Maria. It then suddenly clicks in her brain that this was also an in-game event where she had actually told the girls to attack. But then Maria ends up getting saved by Keith's Earth Doll, and with Rina realizing she's stolen another romance route that Maria could have, she praises herself while drooling in her sleep. The next day, Rina felt the need to keep tabs on Maria's relationships developing. She asks Maria if she likes anyone, but Maria and the other girls respond that they just like Rina. They all have an upcoming day off, and Maria explains she has to head home and spend time with her family. So logically, Katarina felt the need to head to where Maria lives with her brother Keith tagging along. It all started with Keith finding her dressed up for the fields in the morning. However, he wasn't expecting her to tell him that she wanted to go see some real farm fields outside of her garden. Rina and Keith spent their time learning how to farm, observing various vegetables and even a giant pumpkin. They then head to a local town, and Rina asks some of the townsfolk where Maria lives. So they point her in the right direction and explain that Maria is famous in these parts for being kind and also for being a commoner with light magic. They finally spot Maria's house and decide to head over. They meet with Maria's mother, who is surprised to learn that Maria had been making sweets at school for them. Then Maria walks in, happy to see her friends visiting. Her mother is shocked to see the joyous expression that Maria wears, but the only expression Rina knows how to wear is hunger for Maria's sweets. Maria offers to make sweets, and while she's doing that, Rina decides to test her new farming techniques on the family farm. While Maria started to work on the confectionaries, she thought back at her happiest moments of making treats with her parents. She lived a normal life, until one day, she healed one of her friends with light magic. The townsfolk began to scrutinize her and her family, suspecting Maria to be an illegitimate daughter of a noble, since light magic is usually only passed down amongst noble families. Despite this, she tried regaining her normal life, but everyone treated her differently, which only made her feel more isolated. One day, she even made treats for her whole class, only for exactly no one to partake in enjoying her sweets with her, and on her lonely walk home, she desperately wished that someone would just look at her. Maria's mother remembers that day. From then on, Maria would no longer make sweets. She couldn't help her daughter, as she had her own problems to deal with, but this didn't make her feel any less terrible as a mother. However, seeing Maria happily make treats for her friends brought tears to her eyes. So the mother decided to dig up the old cookie cutters out of the closet, and the two began to bond once again over making cookies together as a family. The four of them basked in the tasty cookies, and as they all said their goodbyes for the evening, Maria's mother asked the siblings to continue to be good friends with Maria, to which Rina happily acknowledged. The heartwarming moment between mother and daughter made Katarina want to visit her own mother, so the siblings decided to head home. But instead of being greeted with a heartwarming moment from the Duchess, instead, Katarina got the death stare from her mother, all because their mom found out that Rina was growing a farm on the school grounds, and Rina screamed knowing she was going to receive a spanking. We then turn to Sasaki Atsuko, or as Rina called her, Ah-chan, who had been missing Rina this whole time. We get a glimpse in time of their first meeting, where Rina had apologized for almost killing Ah-chan with her butt. Ah-chan remembered Rina as a person who brought color to her life. She finally had someone to talk to about books and games. She even helped Rina study, even though Rina was both stupid and lazy, leading to the two of them passing and getting into high school together. Their days were happy until suddenly Rina passed away from getting into a traffic accident. And even though she felt lonely again, as she walked home from the funeral, she saw her last message from Rina on her phone. It read, "Ah-chan, I can't conquer the black-hearted sadistic prince, Jordo," which caused her to laugh and then cry, hoping that if she were to be reborn when her life ended, she'd want to befriend Rina again. But why is Sophia Ascart the one crying with these dreams constantly recurring? She decides to visit Rina, hoping to get comfort from her sad dream. Rina thinks she must be nervous with the exams upcoming, and it's something she has to take seriously herself, since her mom will yell at her if she doesn't pass and graduate. We move to the day of the practical exam, where the professor tells them they must retrieve a magic stone from inside the ruins in order to pass. They can't take the exam lightly, as it's a difficult maze with various traps layered throughout. And even with the task being dangerous, to be able to navigate the ruins and find the stone is to test all of their understanding of their own magic abilities. Katarina's team heads inside the maze, and while Jordo and Keith argue over who's going to protect Rina, she accidentally presses into a trap and causes a boulder to chase after them until they get away. They eventually stumble upon a crossroads and an ancient text that Rina can't read at all, even though they've been learning how to read ancient script in class. After Sophia reads the text, they learn the west path will be difficult, but towards their destination, and the east path will lead to a dead end. Rina wants to head east first, since in video games, dead ends often lead to treasure chests. However, the crew drags her west and ignores her ridiculous comment entirely. They continue their trek, and Rina wishes she could be more useful to the team. She decides to use her earth bump to fill a tiny pothole, so that way no one can trip on it, and the boys praise her for her basically useless talent. Rina continues forward and accidentally triggers an arrow trap, so Jordo and Keith have to protect them all. However, Rina ends up falling into a trap through the wall, reaching a floor below. She calls out hoping someone would find her, but no one can hear her at all. She decides to survive. She needs some food. She spots some mushrooms she can eat, all while an ominous black cloud appears behind her and disappears. Near the entrance, the group gets together, trying to come up with a plan to search for Katarina. Nicole then comes up with a plan to use his wind magic because it can pick up people's voices through air vibrations. Both him and Sophia summon the winds and pick up on Katarina discovering more mushrooms in a large chasm. Rina has a difficult time picking the mushrooms, but conveniently, she finds a crystal next to her and easily snips the mushrooms for easy collection. She feels a black presence around her again and then trips, hanging on to a ledge. Sophia then grabs her in the nick of time, and as they're about to fall, a mysterious wind saves the two of them. The group arrives at the scene, happy to see Rina survive. Then Alan notices the rock Rina was using to cut mushrooms was actually one of the magic stones they needed to pass the exams. Rina never noticed the magic inside of the rock because she was too hungry, causing Alan to laugh over her sheer stupidity. While the group celebrates, Maria notices a black shadow hovering over Rina, wondering what it is. She doesn't get to talk about it, however, because Rina wants to have a mushroom party. A few days later, however, the worst is to come. The doom flags Katarina had been trying to avoid have come to fruition, with the girls at school ready to make Rina atone for all the atrocities she's committed. But wait, what has she actually done? Was it when she started farming on school grounds, or when she would sometimes throw toy snakes at Jordo? No. She's being demonized for flaunting her status as a duke's daughter and Prince Jordo's fiancée, and also for her constant bullying of Maria because of her rare light magic and closeness to everyone in the student council. Then it suddenly clicked. These are all the things Katarina was accused of in the original game, but after getting exposed, the ones who were supposed to confront her were either Keith or Jordo, depending on the route the heroine was on. They were supposed to take a stand to protect Maria, so none of this makes sense, because Rina hasn't been bullying her at all. However, all the girls insist they witnessed Rina doing it, with paper stacks of evidence in hand as well. And when Jordo and the gang walk in, the accusers hand the paper evidence over to Rina's friends, leaving her worried that all the doom flags had finally caught up to her. Rina is terrified of her fate to come, but she has nothing to fear because Maria tells them their claims are ridiculous. And reading the quote-unquote evidence, every single one of Rina's friends, from her fiancé Jordo to her brother Keith, Mary, and Alan, all of them think Rina is too simple-minded to scheme up an elaborate bullying plan. And even though they're defending her, Katarina can't help but feel a little insulted. But it's true that Marina has been experiencing bullying throughout her school days, not from Rina, but these girls who are accusing her. And as they continue to run off, Maria sees some malicious shadows clinging to the girls. With Rina's worries behind her, she begins to eat, as her friends all discuss the suspicious actions from the girls that were accusing Rina. It was really convenient for Rina to get accused while the student council was called away, as if the girls had been waiting to strike when they knew all of Rina's friends weren't going to be there. However, Rina doesn't think much of it as she continues to eat and celebrate that she's avoided all of her doom flags. The friends walk together after lunch, but when Maria spots another menacing black shadow, she tells them she's got to head somewhere by herself. Rina would come to regret this, as it would be the last time any of them see her. 2 days later, Rina beats herself up at the student council office for not going with Maria. As Sirius serves her some of the warm, gentle tea, she can't help but feel he's worried for Maria too. All of her friends must be worried as well. She becomes more determined to search, and they all search, but another day passes with no results. Later that night, Jordo comes to visit Rina, not with any information on where Maria is, but instead to bring her attention to the evidence papers the girls from earlier had on her. Jordo and the gang had found out that not only were the girls not the ones who had put the papers together, but they also had no memories from the day they tried to persecute Rina. Those girls had suddenly been overcome with a strange urge to attack Rina's character, but as soon as they left the cafeteria, the feelings disappeared. It was as if someone had been controlling them. Jordo then explains it must be the result of the forbidden dark magic, the sixth element of magic that only a scant few in the entire country know about. A magic that can manipulate people's hearts. A magic that no one is born with, but is obtained as a result of human sacrifice. And the dark magic user seems to be targeting Katarina, with Maria being a casualty because light mages can see the black shadows that emanate off of the use of dark magic. Jordo suspects Maria must have pursued the dark mage after realizing what was happening, and as a result, got abducted. The shadows end up consuming all of Katarina's friends. If she knew this was the fate awaiting her, she would have gladly taken the doom flags by herself. She awakens in tears from the nightmare. It must have been because of the conversation she had with Jordo earlier. She starts to shake when she remembers the human sacrifice required to obtain the dark magic. The next day, she falls over from her exhausting late night. Her friends take her to the nurse's office, and after waking up from a refreshing nap, she decides to visit the spot where she and Maria first became friends. She thinks about the time they had spent together and worries deeply for Maria's safety. Then, Sirius suddenly appears, asking what she's doing. So Rina explains she had just woken up and this area always made her think of her dear missing friend. He tells her with Maria missing, it's dangerous for her to be out here alone, and offers to walk her to class. And as the wind blows, she takes notice of how pretty his bright red hair and glittering gray eyes are, but also wonders what he's doing out here. She then gets a flashback of when Achan had told her about a hidden character that can be conquered in Fortune Lover, a dangerous guy with black magic, a bad ending where the protagonist and all her friends get killed by him, bright red hair and gray eyes. Oh shit. It's definitely Sirius. With her lost in thoughts, Sirius asks her what's wrong, She then responds by asking if he has dark magic and if he was the one who kidnapped Maria, but he has no idea what she's talking about. Of course he wouldn't. Even Rina only learned about dark magic last night, and this world must be different from the actual Fortune Lover game, since so many events are different. There's no way someone as kind as Sirius could be behind all the misfortunes. But he then breathes a sigh, annoyed that she always referred to him as kind. After all, it's all been an act, since it's easier for him to get by if he pretends to be a nice, quiet boy. And luckily, dumb fucks like Baccarina totally fall for it. He then tells Rina he did kidnap Maria, right after she confronted him for the black aura that seemed to surround him. He tried to manipulate her memories to forget what she saw that day, but Maria resisted it because of her light magic, so he grabbed her and knocked her out with some chemicals and took her away. All of this because he truly hates Katarina for the way she helps the lonely guys around her. Katarina knows Sirius may be fated to kill her friends, but she can't help but feel there's something really sad within him, as if he could cry at any time. He brushes her hand away and rejects her, wrapping her in an endless darkness that puts her to sleep. Things were a normal day for this girl, woken up by her mother, scolding her for being late for school after another session of all-night gaming. She goes to the mirror to fix her hair, but can't quite get the calyx out like her maid Anne. But wait, who is Anne again? Remembering she's late for school, she tells her mother and brother goodbye as she runs off with a cucumber in her mouth. She thinks she's safe, but the teacher tells her she's totally late. During lunchtime, the girl enjoys pleasantries with her best friend, Achan. They talk about their favorite ultimate game, Fortune Lover, with the girl excited that she's about to conquer the self-centered Prince Alan. But for some reason, he doesn't seem so self-centered lately. He's actually become pretty nice and easy for her to talk to. With the girl pondering her mysterious emotions around characters from the game the two of them enjoy, she ignores her underlying feelings to enjoy her meal. Her usual routine, sleeping in class, getting smacked by the teacher to wake up, the normal day by day, spending time with her family, and reading manga with Achan. But the girl can't help but feel she's forgetting something important. We then turn back to Rina, who's fallen into a deep slumber for the past 2 days. Her friends gather, completely depressed and disheveled, hoping because they've hired the best doctor in the country, they can find a solution to awaken Rina. Anne tells the friends to enter Rina's room, so they gather around the doctor, who tells them nothing is physically wrong with her, and that she could awaken at any time, as soon as right now, or maybe never. Keith freaks out at the doctor, and Jordo hits the wall. Everyone is depressed from the horrible news. Later that night, Anne tries to give Rina some water to drink, completely distracted with heartbreak. When she hears a knock on the door, she drops the teapot and it shatters. Jordo checks if everything's alright, but they're all hanging on by a thread. Regardless, he takes over to watch Katarina. Holding her hand at her bedside, he utters her name, and remembers the strange girl he had fallen for. His world was once colorless and filled with boredom. It was her who filled it with color, showing him happiness and pleasure, jealousy, and loneliness as well. She taught him all these emotions. Even though he knew danger was near, he felt helpless for being unable to protect her. He then grabs the water and gives it to Rina with a kiss. Outside the door, Keith sits with a gloomy expression, remembering the warmth his dear sister had given him, brightening his world and saving him from loneliness. He vowed to get strong enough to protect her, but beat himself up for not being there when she needed him. Mary sat alone in Rina's garden, reminiscing on the first time they had met, remembering how shy and timid she was. But when Katarina had told her she was special and amazing, she began to love herself and accept herself. She just wanted to be with the one who was most precious to her. We turned to Alan, slamming his fist against a tree, remembering Rina had told him everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Since he was young, he had always sulked about being less talented than Giordo, but when Rina constantly competed with him head-on, he was able to loosen the tension he had put on himself. Being around Rina made him feel so comfortable, it felt as if it was the most natural thing in the world to him. And he felt foolish that he now just realized he's in love with her. Nicole stood alone on the balcony, remembering Rina's comments about how blessed he was for having such a lovely family. Growing up, most people had pitied him for the way his sister looked, even though he constantly told everyone there was nothing wrong with her. He eventually developed a growing frustration that no one else seemed to understand, but Rina did, and from then on, Rina became someone special to him. Even though she's engaged to his best friend Giordo, he can't pursue her no matter how he feels, but he still still desires to stay as close for as long as he can. Sophia lies in bed, thinking of when Rina had told her that her white hair was as beautiful as silk and eyes twinkled like rubies. Her whole life, people had called her creepy and cursed because of her looks, but Katerina called her pretty and became the first friend she ever made. She eventually left the room that she always locked herself in to spend time with Rina, and this changed the way she lived moving forward. She doesn't want to lose her dear friend. While crying on her bed, she suddenly hears the voice of Ah-chan saying she finally found her best friend again and she can't bear to lose her. Sophia then gets up and heads to the window to see Ah-chan as her reflection, saying she's going to save her best friend this time. Ah-chan tells Sophia to stop moping and to take her to Rina. Then one by one, the friends all become determined to save Katerina and stay by her side. They all make it back to the room, and Ah-chan tells Sophia she'll handle this, but they all need to keep calling Katerina's name. Back at school, the girl runs. She makes it to the classroom, where Ah-chan had called to meet her. They sit down, and while the girl talks about how she's having trouble conquering the Giordo route, Ah-chan interjects to ask the girl how everything's going at school. The girl asks what she means, then gasps when she sees an image of Sophia flash in front of her. Ah-chan is glad she was able to spend time with the girl again, but reminds her that this isn't her world anymore. It's back with everyone else, and everyone else that's calling her name out. The name Katerina is called over and over, with the friends from another world all begging her to wake up and come back. The girl wonders how she could forget. Her family was annoying but kind. She had an otaku best friend and a beloved otome game. And even though this world is comfortable to be in, Katerina has to go back to the world where all her loved ones are waiting for her. A light flashes and the classroom breaks apart. As the two say their goodbyes, Ah-chan tells Rina that Maria is being kept in the school storehouse. She then tells Rina to save everyone, and as Rina falls, she reaches her hand out, calling her best friend's name one last time. Her best friend that she's been through so much with. And as Ah-chan reaches her hand out, Rina thinks about how she's glad she's been given the chance to give her final farewell. And with tears in her eyes, Rina thanks Ah-chan for always being there for her. With tears in Ah-chan's eyes as well, she's glad she has another chance to spend time with her beloved friend. Now, they'll spend time together in another world, with her as Sophia. On the other side, Katerina tells Sophia not to cry, and everyone rejoices over her return. Rina then tells them she's going to save Maria because of some knowledge she gained in her dream. She also exposes Sirius as the culprit of all the misgivings. So the gang begins their trek to the storehouse that was coincidentally built by the Deke family. They find a hidden pathway in the dust-covered storehouse and break into the room where Maria is held captive. Katerina embraces Maria, relieved that she's safe, but it's not over because Rina wants to try talking to Sirius one more time, all to figure out his reasoning for his actions. We find him in a dark room with eerie lit candles against the walls. Sirius then hears a demonic voice that tells him people are approaching and that he cannot afford to get caught. He utters his fears as his doom has come, but the demon voice reminds Sirius what his mother had said that day, before being killed, when she had told Sirius to avenge her. The voice beckoned Sirius to eliminate everyone using his dark magic. And when the gang reached his room, dark energy poured out, and Giordo and Alan drew their swords ready to fight. But Sirius was most puzzled by Katerina. Not by her waking up, but instead why she came back to him after he tried to eliminate her. After all, he admits to having fully intended to kill her, but she doesn't feel what he did was that bad, nor does she believe he actually tried to kill her. Because if he wanted to kill her, why did he not just do it on the spot instead of putting her to sleep? She wants to try talking to Sirius again, because when she saw him before, he looked truly sad and like he was in pain. However, the man before them isn't Sirius. That boy died long ago. The man standing before them is Raphael Waltz. And 8 years ago, his mother was killed in front of him in this very room. We move to Raphael's past, where his mother said the tea he makes has such a gentle flavor, exactly what Rina had been saying. He smiled overjoyed that the tea he had been working to perfect was something that his mother could enjoy. Then suddenly, some men barged into their home, and next thing he knew, he had awakened in the storehouse with the woman standing before him. Raphael struggling to escape his bindings. He could only watch as the woman approached the dead boy adjacent to him, as she told her beloved not to worry because he'll have a new body soon. The woman called in the sacrifice, which was Raphael's mother, and we learn that the mysterious woman is the mother of the already dead boy, Sirius Deke. Raphael's mother begs Mrs. Deke not to harm her son, but Mrs. Deek felt contempt towards the mother for stealing her husband away. She then tells them she has no intention of letting the two live happily. Mrs. Deek plans to transfer Sirius's soul into Raphael's body using dark magic. A man in the room begins chanting, and darkness illuminates around Raphael's mother. Then the man sacrifices her to complete the ritual. And as Raphael screams her name, she called for him to avenge her. Now that the man had obtained dark magic, he touched the two boys' heads and began moving Sirius's memories over as Raphael screamed his lungs out. Mrs. Deek then came to the boy, ecstatic to hear him call her mother. The man who had done the deed then told her with the mission complete, he'd like to head back to his own family, only to get backstabbed by the men behind him, all because Mrs. Deek intended to leave no witnesses behind. Raphael explains it was Sirius's memories that told him his playboy father had an affair with the maid who was Raphael's mother, and these memories were the only thing that transferred, along with the dark magic, since both Raphael's mind and soul remained completely intact. Raphael had been pretending to be the good boy Sirius the entire time in order to inherit the Deek family name and to get revenge on the woman who killed his mother. The darkness grows, but Katerina chooses to walk towards him anyways. She acknowledges she's just a villainess playing the heroine's role, and if she can't save him, she at least wants to comfort Raphael and be by his side, just like her friends have done for her the entire time. Raphael then remembered a time when his mother had told him something similar, that she wouldn't leave his side until he felt better. So don't cry alone, his mother had said, and now Rina too was standing before him and calling out his true name, confused at how he should feel. Raphael remembered his mother's true dying words, which were, "Please live, be happy, and I love you." Raphael then reaches out for Rina's hand, but then the darkness tells him not to listen to her. With Raphael's desire for revenge quelled, the darkness reveals itself to be the man who killed Raphael's mother. The man had survived to get his revenge on Mrs. Deek and is unwilling to let go of his control over Raphael. The darkness swarmed them all, but Rina held Raphael's hand, reassuring him. Raphael disavowed the man, saying he didn't need him anymore, and a light flashed, freeing him from the cursed dark magic. With the whole ordeal resolved, Raphael would eventually tell the authorities everything. He would leave school for the time being and go on a minor journey to atone for his sins. His testimonies also exposed Mrs. Deek and her underlings, landing them all jail time. And while Rina missed Raphael at school, she's glad she was able to save everyone from dying, with the final challenge being the second year's, or aka Nicole's, graduation party. In the original game, Maria is supposed to leave the party midway and confess to who she truly loves. So Katerina's fate rests on Maria's path of a good or bad ending. She's been preparing her entire life for both. Toy snake to throw at Giordo if she needs to escape, or all the things she'll need pre-packed if she gets exiled. With her plan having been culminating over the past 8 years, she's ready to take it all on. Nicole receives flowers from some ladies congratulating him, and when they run away, the main group of girls gives him their gifts. However, Rina's is a veggie bouquet, and the sight of it giving all the boys in the group a good laugh. Then, while Giordo and Alan give their musical performance, Rina looks at Maria, wondering which guy she's going to choose. She worries it could end up being a reverse harem route, where Maria ends up with all the guys. And supposedly, that's a route where Katerina dies as well. She then heads over to Maria, and with a heavy sigh, asks her directly if there's a boy she likes. Maria thinks for a second, but responds that she isn't interested in any boys. Maria then says the line's meant for the guy she conquers in the game, and asks Katerina to stay by her side, which catches Rina off guard. But then, Maria and Sophia butt in, because they want to stay with Katerina forever too, and so do the boys. Rina looks around and comes to the conclusion that this must be the friendship ending, where the heroine doesn't end up with anyone, but everyone remains friends. So she celebrates avoiding her doom. The friends hang out in the student council room, and when Mary serves tea, Katerina gets a familiar taste. Raphael comes back as a surprise, and we learn that even though he wasn't able to graduate, he's been hired to work for the school's Department of Magic. He then kneels before Katerina, asking to stay by her side, and she welcomes him into her life with open arms. Katerina had thought that she had the worst luck, being reincarnated as the villainess in her favorite Ultimate game, but instead, she became the luckiest, with a new set of friends and family that love her. Another beautiful morning, with our Baccarina drooling in her sleep as she says, "Oh, Count." Her maid Anne pulls the blanket away, telling her to wake up as she can't be stupid and lazy all day just because there's no school today. After a light yawn, Katerina excuses her behavior with the fact that she was up late at night reading the newest book in the Devilish Count series to celebrate avoiding all of her doom flags. But this only makes Anne sigh, as she has no idea what her master is talking about. Getting up, Katerina happily headed towards her normal gardening routine, full of glee, as she had no worries left in her life. Even the little Rinas in her mind were celebrating that they could finally stop working so hard, recalling the fact that they reached the fantastic friendship ending, where everyone stayed friends instead of pursuing a route with Katerina. Although I'm pretty sure they all want to marry her. As Katerina danced to the tune of her gardening, her mother stared with her usual disappointed and concerned look, while her father didn't think too much of it. Rina was just celebrating the spring of her second year at the Magic Academy, sitting down with Jord. She's excited to learn about a biennial school festival that's being held soon. She gleams at the idea of having okonomiyaki and takoyaki, like back in her previous life, drooling stupidly while getting lost in thought. Jord brings her back to reality, telling her she can stay relaxed, as he goes in to feed her a macaron. But of course, Keith has to butt in immediately. Keith is a little annoyed he's been ignored here the entire time, but apparently, Jord never invited him to begin with. The two continued to argue over Rina, as she continued munching without even a single thought in her head. In the evening, Maria entered the student council room, finding Katerina having a bit of a dilemma. Rina wants to sell the vegetables she'd been growing, but the school told her it wouldn't be appropriate and refused. So, Maria offered to make them into sweets. Hearing this, the cogs in Rina's brain started clicking. She wanted to sell Maria's sweets at the festival. Jord was skeptical about allowing this at first, but all Katerina had to do was stare at him, and he reluctantly was convinced. Mary, Sophia, and Alan then entered. The student council was also putting on a play, and Sophie and Maria wanted Rina in it. However, Rina wasn't so excited, remembering her previous acting roles in her past life only being trees and rocks. She decided not to partake in the acting, but was more than happy to help her friends behind the scenes. Reaching the day of the school festival, Rina ran through the street in glee, but then suddenly stopped herself, remembering Anne had told her not to behave so unruly, as it would embarrass her mother who would be in attendance. She then began sneaking around like she was on a stealth mission. After thinking she was safe, she decided it was time to eat until she was ready to bust. However, she quickly lost excitement since this festival seemed to only have fancy food. I mean, she's not in Japan anymore. I don't really know what she was expecting. Some of her classmates spotted her on the ground depressed, and all three of them immediately concluded she must be too hungry. So feeding her one bite of croissant lit her back up. She had determination once again and perused around eating so many sweets. Hitting the exhibition room, she decided to sit down with Mary and Keith, who were in charge, where Keith had already poked at the fact that she must have been engrossed in eating and forgotten the time. With him scolding her to behave, Rina felt concerned he was becoming more and more like their mother every year. Digging into even more food, she decided to share some with Keith, making him a little embarrassed with her trying to feed him. Mary then began commenting passive-aggressively, saying Keith was taking advantage of Rina's indirect kisses. The two then of course began arguing, just like everyone else does in this show, while Rina stuffed herself like a pig, thinking they got along so well. Wait, she for some reason suspects her brother keeps refusing marriage offers because he might be in love with Mary. Even knowing Mary is engaged to Prince Alan, Rina tells the two if push comes to shove, she's on the side of their love, and they both look at her with disappointment, knowing she's completely misunderstood. Later, Nicole comes for a visit, and his devilish smile makes Rina blush. But Katerina is more concerned with what happened to all the guests lying on the floor. Sophia then explains she wanted more people to be interested in coming to the festival, so she got her brother to stand at the gate, and seeing him apparently made them all get this way. The two siblings then bring up their mild disappointment that Rina wouldn't be performing in the play, although Rina thinks people would be more excited to see Nicole act instead. Apparently, he can't act though, since his facial expressions for a happy, angry, sad, and amused are all the same. However, when he's with Katerina, he can actually manage a smile. Katerina and Nicole then do some minor acting from the script, and with him touching her face, Just him saying, "I love you," makes Rina lose it. She accidentally responds, I love you too, Nicole," instead of saying Prince, like the role he was playing, prompting him to hug her close. He then whispered, "Katarina, even if you belonged to someone else, I would." But these definitely aren't the lines from the play. Returning to the festival outside to recover from the heat of the scene, Katarina spots Maria and Raphael, who's in disguise. He's here for work, but since that incident that happened at school, he's been using a magic tool his boss gave him to disguise himself. With him being the lowest on the food chain working in the Department of Magic, he's had to work really hard. Maria also decided to join the department. Reason being, she wants to obtain a title good enough to stay by Rina's side. Raphael is perfectly fine with her reason for joining, but brings up the fact that when Katarina finally gets married, the two may still not be able to see each other anymore. Maria is worried about not being able to see Rina again. However, Rina is only worried she's barely making it as a duke's daughter, thinking there's no way she could pass as royalty. Raphael then offers Rina a position at the magic department, getting her excited because while it may not prevent her marriage, she'd at least get a few more years of independence. And Maria is certainly shining at the idea of working together with her. Continuing a bit more of the festivities, Rina decides to buy a jewel to commemorate her time here, and then watches various magic performances happening throughout the festival. She then made it to her promised meetup with Jord and Alan, who also pointed out that she probably had been distracted by eating the entire time. Dang, everyone knows she's a porker. Handing the two guys sweets from Maria's stall, Rina hears Jord say Maria's name without addressing her as Miss. She then feels her womanly intuition kicking in once again, suspecting her fiancé is attracted to Maria. She's so lost in thought, Alan chops her on the head to focus, and then pats her. Jord then pulls the hand away though, and now the brothers are arguing over Rina. Then enters Jord and Alan's two older brothers, Jeffrey and Ian, and their fiancés. Jeffrey tells Rina, "Long time no see." However, Rina didn't remember they had met at a party once. She then greets all of them, including the fiancés, Susanna and Selena. Jord questioned why the siblings were here, to see his beloved younger brothers, of course. And he then began hugging all over Alan ecstatically, until someone came to give Jord some bad news. The friends discuss how an actor sprained their ankle right before the play, and explained to Rina their role was a wicked older stepsister who bullies the protagonist. With everyone believing Katarina to be the best possible replacement, she becomes nervous. She then stares at Jord, hoping he'll decline them, but he just cheers her on, telling her she'll be fine. Now that she's dressed in a villainous costume, the little Rinas in her head are all annoyed, since they had just disbanded days ago, and they had no confidence in her acting whatsoever. However, seeing how hard Sophia had been working on this play made Rina get serious. She quickly made cue cards, just in case she forgets her lines. With the play about to begin, Duke Clays tells his wife it's a shame Katarina would only be working behind the scenes, but the Duchess was fine with it, knowing her daughter would certainly find a way to ruin the play somehow if she performed. Backstage, seeing how exposed Katarina was up top, Jord put a scarf on her, in the guise of saying he just didn't want her to get sick. As Katarina's part of the performance ensued, seeing the crowd, Rina became nervous. She had to say her first lines to bully Maria, who was playing the protagonist, but realized she dropped her cue card on a table behind her, and this made Duchess Clays incredibly nervous. Figuring out what happened, Mary decided to improvise, telling the crowd it was time for her and Rina to practice their dancing. They spin until Mary puts Rina in a drop position, only for the cue card to fall completely off the stage. Then, with it being Mary's time to leave, Maria comes up to ask Rina if she could go to the ball. Rina begins to panic, but her thoughts in her brain then realize she can just act like a villainess, since she knows all of Katarina's lines from Fortune Lover. The friends from backstage are astonished to hear Rina saying, "You really ought to learn your place. You thought you could go to the ball all covered in mud? Don't make me laugh." Maria can tell Rina is ad-libbing, so when she asks to go to the ball once again, Rina kicks a barrel and tells her, "I guess you'd have to be reborn 1,000,000 times to understand," while giving her a smug, condescending look. After all, the only ones suitable for the ball are perfect ladies like Katarina herself. Peasants like Maria are more suited to crawl along the ground. The lines were delivered so perfectly, The sound of Rina's cackle made the crowd cheer with them going into a scene change. Behind the curtain, Rina apologized for ruining Sophia's lines, but she was fine with it. Sophia then decided to add a romantic subplot for Rina and a knight in a black mask. Keith, Alan, Mary, and Jord all offered to play the knight, even though none of that would make sense. But what makes the most sense is she offers the role to her brother, because wearing a mask, he wouldn't have to worry about his facial expressions. We move to the ballroom scene, where Nicole breaks in, introducing himself as the Phantom Thief, Black Mask. Taking Rina in hand, he draws his sword against Prince Jord. The story declares Black Mask to be taking Katarina hostage in a plot to steal the castle's riches. But something isn't right. Jord whispers to Nicole that he's too close to Rina and tells him to back off a little. But this only makes Nicole grab her closer. The two then begin dueling each other with their blades, and Jord gets the upper hand, pulling Rina to his side. Keith then comes in to interrupt as well, and now it's a three-way deadlock. They fight, and when Nicole's mask comes off, some of the ladies in the crowd begin to faint. Rina then decides to refocus everyone's attention. She snaps her finger, putting the spotlight on herself, and announces Black Mask is actually working with her, as a ruse she planted to distract the prince. Now that she has the prince's attention, she cackles, saying he'll never get with Maria. During another scene change backstage, the three boys apologize for getting a little too into it. They then continue to the end, with Jord getting Maria and Nicole getting Rina, and then everyone cheered. And afterwards, Rina's parents were so proud of her and Keith. That night, in the dressing room, a girl came knocking to guide Rina to the ball for the evening. With them suddenly stopping on the way there, someone grabbed Rina from behind and incapacitated her. Jord sat mentally exhausted, only thinking about how Katarina disappeared without warning one night ago. A servant then presented him a letter, and he was astonished to read the contents. Katarina then woke up in a room unfamiliar to her, and checking in on her is a maid named Lana, who will apparently be looking after her needs starting today. Rina was confused because she already had a maid, and on top of that, she wanted to know where she was. But Lana was forbidden from answering. Next to enter the room was a handsome blue-haired gentleman with blue eyes, named Rufus, and behind him was Selena, Prince Ian's fiancée. Selena apologized for being so rough with Rina, and promised when everything was over, she'd be able to return home unharmed. Now things were clicking in Rina's mind, remembering she had been knocked out on the way to the ball. Her inner self started discussing the kidnapping of a duke's daughter for ransom money not being unheard of, thinking her own mother would be perfectly fine having Keith as their only heir, giving up on their foolish daughter. With her little selves crying in her mind, studious Rina decides to find out the ransom price and negotiate it down. So when Rina asked, Selena answered she actually wasn't looking for ransom money at all. But before she could give an answer, Rufus stopped her, and for some reason her eyes became mesmerized. Then she became complicit with returning to her room. Staring outside the window, Rina was concerned about where she was. However, when Lana offered to help in any way she could, the first thing Rina did was be a pig and order a buffet of sweets to eat. And Lana also gave Rina a new edition of a romance novel she'd been wanting to read. So, Rina hopped into bed, excited to be here since she could read, eat sweets, and laze around all she wanted, certainly taking Lana aback. At the castle, Jord continued to stare at the letter he received with much concern. Then, Prince Jeffrey appeared, prodding. The letter read, "We have Katarina Clays. If you want her back unharmed, renounce your right to the throne." Prince Jord had no clue who the perpetrator was, so Jeffrey decided to lend a hand. After finishing her novel, Rina sparkled, making Lana concerned about why Rina wasn't more worried about her situation. After all, she didn't know where she was or why she was taken, and hearing this made Rina gasp, because she absolutely forgot. This made Lana crack up because the rumors about Rina were apparently true. However, Rina doesn't remember meeting her before. That night, Rina and Selena stared at each other in the darkness of the dining room as Rufus served them. Selena then began to express concern about Rina's well-being, prompting Rina to respond that she was fine, as she couldn't admit she was so comfortable she forgot they kidnapped her. But all Selena could think about is the weight on her mind, as she thought Katarina was pretending to be okay with all of this. She once again tried telling Katarina about why she was kidnapped, but Rufus stopped Selena again, telling her it was time to return to her room. In bed,
Rina kept thinking about how strange Selena was acting earlier. She also wondered what all her friends were up to, now acknowledging they must all be worried about her. Elsewhere, Alan was telling Mary to rest. However, they both hadn't slept at all last night. They both smirked at the same time at the two of them being betrothed. Alan had admitted prior that he had feelings for someone else, and Mary did too, and we all know it's Katarina. The two are both in the same position though, being in love with someone they may never reach, but neither are willing to give up, so they're holding on to their engagement status so that they can't be approached by other suitors, both determined to do what it takes to save Katarina. Selena then suddenly recovered from her daze, wondering how she ended up in her room again. Talking in her sleep peacefully, Rina got a visit from Selena. Selena was worried Rina was too anxious to sleep, but is definitely misreading our dummy villainess. Selena then revealed she was the one who planned this kidnapping with the intent of using Rina as a shield to get Prince George to renounce his right to the throne. She's doing this to make Prince Ian crown prince. Rina knows once a prince renounces their throne rights, they can't get them back. She doesn't believe George would throw something so important away for her. However, Selena responds that it's widely known George actually loves her dearly. But Rina only takes their engagement as breakwater to protect him from other engagement offers. This is when Selena begins to tear up, knowing George truly loves Rina. Where the friends have gathered, George admits he'd renounce his throne rights 100 times over to protect Rina, but it actually takes a while to do. Alan then logically explains it's a better use of their time to just find Rina. Maria then brings up the point that dark magic might be involved, since the students who saw Katarina the night she disappeared all had hazy memories, just like when Raphael had used dark magic to manipulate the students last year. Then appeared Raphael at the door, who assured everyone that Katarina was safe. Sitting at bedside, Selena admits feeling jealous about Rina and George's relationship, thinking that the two love and support each other. However, she definitely has the wrong idea. She's also jealous of Lady Susanna, who's touted as the most talented lady in the kingdom, and Mary, who's hailed as the model noblewoman. Rina apparently was regarded as holy and likened to a saint, which was news to her. However, Selena felt there was nothing special about herself. She felt inadequate in even her ability to support Prince Ian as a fiancé. So, she did all of this to help, even if in the tiniest way. When this is all said and done, Selena plans to turn herself in and call off her engagement to atone. She felt she was only chosen to be Ian's betrothed because she was a duke's daughter who had magic, but she had always loved him even from a young age. She desperately wanted to become a woman who would be worthy of him. However, her magic remained weak, and at the Magic Academy, Jeffrey, Susanna, and Ian were chosen for student council while she herself felt inferior among them. Over time, their parents and relations started saying someone else should replace her as Ian's fiancé, and Rina could really relate. Her mother said the same thing about her all the time. She then asked Selena if she ever asked Prince Ian how he feels. However, Selena always felt too embarrassed to ask. But Rina reassures Selena the only way to truly find out is to ask, and offered her hand out to be Selena's friend. Selena accepted, no longer wanting to be swayed by the opinions of others. She'll hear it personally from Ian. She then decided to put an end to this whole kidnapping. However, opening the door, she fell unconscious into Rufus's arms. He wasn't going to let things come to an end yet. He needed Selena to take blame for all of this and disappear with Prince Ian, as well as get rid of Rina and George. Rina's mind can't fathom who this butler is and why he possesses dark magic, but now there's no way she can sleep. Until later when she's completely snoring without a care in the world. Even Rufus wonders what is wrong with this girl. She then jolts up, hearing Rufus tell her it's already past noon, the only thing she seems worried about for some reason. However, she has much more to ask, like where he obtained dark magic, to which Rufus answered he gained it from his master in order to remove Ian and George from the throne. Rufus's master wants Prince Jeffrey, the first prince, to be king. Afterwards, he leaves a bell in case Rina needs anything, and after her usual munching of breakfast, she immediately rings the bell to summon Rufus for more food. He finds her behavior unbelievable, questioning if she's really the daughter of a noble. As he goes to leave, Rina asks him to join her. Tired of being surprised by her every little action, he decides to lighten up his polite talk, having felt dumb putting up an act for someone like her. She then surmised he wasn't actually a butler, and looked more like someone who lived downtown. Turns out, He's from the slums and also not from this country. He was actually taken in by slave traders as a kid and bought by his current master. However, he considered himself fortunate. Rina thought of him as so cool and felt his optimistic mindset was admirable. Hearing her positive response made him go silent. He then started laughing in tears and now decided he wanted to talk to her more. They talked for hours and hours, even reaching sunset. This is when Rina questioned him about the method he gained dark magic, to which he answered his master put him to sleep with drugs and when he woke up he could use it. She then learns his name isn't actually Rufus. He's gone by many names. After all, he didn't have any parents and he'd been scrounging in the slums through garbage as far back as he could remember. Standing up close to her, Rina begins taking in how attractive he is, especially having the mole under his eyes sexy characters always have. She then called his eyes beautiful, like the color of a clear sky, and this tempted Rufus. He then began going in for a kiss, but stopped when Rina's stomach began to rumble, making him break into laughter again. We turn back to Rufus's childhood, where he and his friends tricked people and stole things in the slums. His big turning point was when this nobleman had come from the outside world. He taught Rufus how to read, write, math, and many other things, and eventually the man named him Sora because his eyes were as pretty as the sky. The two bonded quite frequently, and regardless of his own living situation, Sora always had a positive outlook. However, one day, the man fell ill, and the only way to cure him was with expensive medicine, a kind that folks in the slums could never afford. On a rainy night, Sora tried to steal some, but was unfortunately caught. He smiled, thinking of the warm similarity he felt from Rina and his old friend. At dinner, Sora and Rina enjoyed a lovely time, chatting more. Hearing all about Sora's travels, she mentions she'd love to visit other countries as well. So he smoothly replies he wouldn't mind visiting other countries again if it was with her, and she was ecstatic about it. However, Sora thought it not to be realistic, since the two of them come from different worlds. But Rina thought nothing of their difference in status. Right now, they're talking and eating dinner together. He then agreed to take her next time. So, she decided to give him a jewel that could take on the color of both their eyes, depending on the lighting, as a promise. This was all too much for Sora to take in, so he picked her up, threw her on the bed, and crawled on top to tell her his chest felt warm when he was with her. He then took off his glasses and right in her face asked, "Why don't you become mine? When you look at me with those eyes, you can't complain about whatever I do to you." Rina doesn't know what the heck is going on, thinking he might be trying to put her to sleep with dark magic, but with a light kiss on her neck, she could only utter, "Huh?" But then, Lana knocked at the door. Sora had an urgent letter he needed to read. Reading the letter in his room, Sora learns the kingdom is investigating his master's manor. Having no idea what to do next, he stares at the jewel he received from Rina. He then visits her, waking Rina up from sleep. He explained to her that the jig was up and he was just going to turn himself in. He knew now he wouldn't be able to see her for a while, and wanted to look at her face one last time. Then, Katarina's friends stormed into the room. Lana then revealed her true identity, Lorna Smith, head of the Department of Magic. Sora then surrendered himself and went into custody peacefully, showing the jewel Rina gave him as acknowledgement of their promise. The morning came, and even though Rina still doesn't recognize her, Lorna says they've met once before. She's apparently a master of disguise. She then gives Rina a tight hug, but Jord breaks it up because he wants some of his fiancée too. We turn to Selena, waking up to Prince Ian. With her beginning to cry, the story he heard was she was being controlled. He then held her tight, glad that she was safe. Remembering Rina telling her to be honest with her feelings, Selena asked the prince if he hated her, because he rarely came to visit and he was always short with her. Ian then shyly admitted he thought she was so cute. He had trouble controlling himself, especially not being officially married yet. He thought it wasn't a good idea for the two of them to cling to each other too much. He can't help but want to touch her whenever he sees her. Now knowing staying away from her must have given her the wrong idea, he apologized. But he wanted to be clear now. He loved Selena. Back where Rina was, her friends expressed their worry for her, but she couldn't possibly tell them she was more comfortable here than back at home. Jord then spotted something on her neck, which Rina assumed was just a bug bite. She thinks she must have gotten it when Sora had pushed her onto the bed. Hearing this put all the friends into a panic. Jord was losing his mind. He wanted to take things slow, but now he felt he'd lose Rina before he even knew it. So, he was gonna take her with a kiss. Rina returned back to normal life at the academy.
Having learned Rufus had admitted to everything, most of the crime was shifted to his master Marquise, David Mason. So, Rena thought it'd be likely Rufus would be given a lighter punishment. She then suddenly stopped to turn around and ask why her friends kept following her. They were just worried, of course, because she always seemed prone to getting kidnapped. We move to Prince Jeffrey's room, where Larna enters, but it's actually his fiancée in disguise, Susanna. Jeffrey wasn't too happy Marquise Mason tried to hurt his little brothers. Even though the Marquise was part of his faction, he had no problem crushing him in his house. He then pulled open a curtain that displayed an excessive amount of portraits of all his little brothers. No one except Susanna knew how much Jeffrey truly adored his siblings, and his ramblings about them made her sigh. When he was younger, he made a promise with their mother to always protect his brothers. But he failed to deliver on that promise. Alan was so frail, he stayed with their mother isolated all the time, and the rest of the siblings were raised separately from their own servants. Around the same time, the former king died before declaring a successor, having left the royal palace in chaos. Jeffrey's parents were always busy, so even though everyone lived at the castle, they all stopped spending time together as a family. When their father became king, the four brothers then became involved in a battle among factions for the right to succession, which tore them all apart even further. Jeffrey truly felt like he made his brothers suffer, unable to do anything. Little did he know, Jord and Alan had always been fond of Jeffrey's care. Jord had lost interest in everything as a child, due to always being separated from his mother. But no matter how cold he was to Jeffrey, Jeffrey always returned, acting flippant as ever, until one day, Jord's world gained color again, at the whims of having to spend time with Katerina. She even got him to become closer with Alan, and throughout all of this, Prince Jeffrey had been watching over them from behind the scenes. Prince Alan had also experienced his struggles in his upbringing being a sickly child. At the age of 5, he felt good enough to walk again, but he was massively behind in his swordplay and studies compared to Jord at this time. And with the servants looking down on him, he began feeling contempt for Jord, developing an inferiority complex. Prince Jeffrey tried to console Alan back then, but Alan had pushed everyone away. But of course, meeting Katerina changed Alan's perspective, now seeing Jord as another person like himself, all while Prince Jeffrey encouraged Alan on his improvements. Back where Ian and Selena were, he had already figured out Jeffrey was the one who solved the kidnapping case. He was always fond of his older brother, despite not being much of the talkative type. Returning to Jeffrey, who was in tears over his brothers and even admiring his fiancée, Susanna had completely ignored him. She had work to do, so it was time to head out. But not before Jeffrey warned her to be more alert about those who discovered the existence of dark magic. Hiding behind his shed, Rena finally got some alone time to herself. Just kidding. Jord found her, and the thought of their kiss made her cheeks flush. With him getting even closer, her skin lit even more red, and her mind didn't know what to do, given she had no romantic experience in her past life or this one. But it didn't matter, because Jord wanted another kiss. And with her stumbling back, she asked why, so he admitted his love to her. But everyone else had to come in to ruin the moment and split the two up. Back in Rena's room, Anne delivered her another gift Jord had sent over, and an invitation to the palace villa. She was freaking out though because she felt too embarrassed to see him again. She didn't hate the idea of marrying him, but felt there was no way she'd pass as a noble. And at the villa, Jord was certainly happy to see her, but not if Keith could help interrupting them. Also, everyone else showed up, since Prince Alan seemed to invite them all. Walking by herself, Rena reflected on how seeing Jord look at her so lovingly made her heart race. Looking up, she was a little saddened that if she became royalty, she wouldn't be able to climb trees anymore, or farm or fish either. She wouldn't be able to eat food she buys walking around town, maybe not even allowed to read romance novels anymore. The idea of that life sounded suffocating. Maria then appeared, and the two decided to take this breather together. Rena admitted her troubles knowing she'd be graduating from the Magic Academy in about half a year, and have to start thinking seriously about marriage. However, Maria assured Rena she'd find a way to stall it by getting her into the Department of Magic. Then, Mary and Sophia appeared, and it began pouring rain and lightning. They took shelter in a cabin, where the three noble girls had been once before. Maria was curious, since she didn't grow up with them, so Sophia decided to tell the story. Visiting the villa when they were kids, even back then, Keith had been trying to get in the way of Jord and Rena. They had decided to venture into a forest nearby, where there were legends of ghosts.
and Prince Alan had gotten scared of a cute little bunny. Rina then spotted a beetle on a tree and decided to climb up and grab it. Bringing up everyone's level of joy, they all started to play around the forest and river till nightfall. Things took a creepy turn though, with the servants popping out and frightening Alan. But he wasn't alone in this, with Rina getting jump scared by Anne. They then decided to split up into girl versus boy teams, where the first team to find the ghosts would win. And on the girls' side, it rained and poured, so they had taken shelter in the same cabin. Rina decided to take it easy, shocking the other two girls that she wasn't afraid of the thunder. To Rina though, it wasn't nearly as loud to her as much as her mother's lectures were. She also was positive about how rain like this helped summer vegetables grow better. The three girls then started to play and dance together. Sophia imagined the lightning as a dark dragon god for them to defeat, and with her and Rina's combined attacks, they were able to defeat it and save the kingdom. And get happily married? The rain eventually cleared, and the sun came out across the beautiful lake nearby. They never ended up finding the ghosts, until later that evening, where Duchess Clays scolded Rina over taking the princess out to climb trees again. The Duchess was unhappy to hear about her daughter playing around like a monkey. The rain then let up, so now Maria could join in on the view of the lake, making wonderful memories with all of them. We move to the Department of Magic, where Raphael and Sora are buried under their work. The work environment is so strict, they have people sleeping in the office. The friends all decided to visit, with Jord, Keith, and Alan not happy to see Sora at all. Inside, Lorna wanted to show them a wish-granting dollhouse that supposedly helps people experience a world akin to their dreams. However, before she could explain how to use it, she gets pulled away by some workers under her for urgent duties. Rina then decides to open the dollhouse, sucking everyone inside, with Anne, Sora, and Raphael left behind. Lorna then came back, excited to see the work of the dollhouse. Alan dreamed of being a bird, free to fly the skies and kiss the one that he loved. Nicole dreamed of being a cat, getting constant pats from Rina, still using his devilish smile to put her in a daze. Sophia wanted to be a story fairy that could spend all her days with Rina, while Jord wanted to be an adventurer unbound by social status, who could protect Rina wherever they traveled. All while Rina expectedly dreamed of lazing around, playing video games, eating junk food, and reading novels. Raphael and Anne entered the dollhouse to attempt a rescue and split up. On Anne's side, she found a really buff Maria making sweets, and Mary being a handsome prince who would steal Katerina away. She then found Keith as a girl, dreaming of everyone being gender swapped. Eventually, Rina broke out of her trance and found Anne. They decided to investigate the 9th room of the dollhouse together, where Raphael dreamed of a peaceful work environment where everyone worked a 9 to 5 with no overtime and could head home to sleep in their beds at night. Rina broke Raphael from his trance because if he stayed here, his colleagues would suffer. This awakened the doll of the dollhouse, who began to attack. So, Raphael engaged it with his wind magic. This gave Rina the opportunity to get behind the doll and pull out its wind-up key, putting it to sleep and freeing everyone. On another day, Nicole's father helped him dodge another marriage proposal. Walking up, they met up with Raphael, and he and Nicole decided to have some tea together. Nicole was being bombarded with marriage offers, having no fiancé or even arranging marriage meetings. But luckily, Nicole's father is pretty laid back about the whole thing, having told him it's important for him to marry who he wants. Staring at the moon that night, Nicole could only think of Katerina, but knowing she was engaged to his best friend, he had to give up on her, and later he asked his father to arrange suitor meetings. At the student council, Rina met up with the other members, Frey and Ginger, attempting to do her work though. Ginger always had to help since Rina was constantly clueless. The one thing Ginger took notice of Rina was that even though she was a duke's daughter, she interacted with those of lower class without discrimination, and having seen her garden before, she thought of Rina as both strange and silly. She felt a little jealous, since she worked hard to get into the student council, while Rina was both weaker in intellect and magic. She thought it might be best to stay away from her. But our villainess finds her own way to get into everyone's heart. Nicole deals with candidate after candidate, but all you can ever think about is Rina, from her habits, to her food consumption, to her relaxed manner of dress when gardening. He then meets up with Frey, who had no intentions of marrying anyone, but only came here at the whim of her parents. She tells him to relax, as women are keen as to whether or not the person talking to them is interested. But I'm pretty sure Katerina's never had that intuition at all. The two then decided to take a walk, where Nicole confessed the person he loved was already engaged to someone else. Surprised, he was able to admit this to someone he had just met. He then asked Frey why she didn't want to be engaged, learning she wanted to live life through her own strength, not just as the wife of a noble. But her parents had been rushing her to get married. However, she just wants to lead in the Department of Magic just like Larna. She wasn't going to give up, so Nicole shouldn't either. Meeting with his father again, Nicole was done with marriage meetings, which is what his father thought he should have relaxed about in the first place. In the family library, Sophia finally learned what Nicole had been up to. She then explained their father actually stole their mother who was engaged to another man. And hearing this really surprised Nicole. Count Ascart had worked hard, becoming the prime minister so he could earn the right to marry their mother, and this ultimately gave Nicole hope. Entering Rena's room, Keith was flabbergasted to see all the gifts Prince Jord had been sending her every day. On their way to school together, Rena asked, why her? She thought of herself as totally normal and not interesting at all. So Keith clapped back that she should try looking up normal in the dictionary sometime. Prince Jord then appeared, and Keith quickly pulled his sister back. Later in her room, Rena expressed her exhaustion from Jord's aggressive attempts at love. Keith consoled her, saying since they were going on break starting tomorrow, they'd be able to relax at home. She thought of Keith as a nice boy compared to her brothers from her previous life. The only way they'd cheer her up was with pro wrestling moves. Keith then spoke with a solemn tone, telling her it was okay if she really loved Jord. Back at the Clays Manor, Katarina happily worked away gardening. Wanting to share her harvest, she knocked on Keith's door, but then realizing she tracked mud in the house, she found her mother giving a death stare in the hallway. Rena tried to escape, but her mother wasn't going to let her go. After hours of lecturing, Rena was exhausted and wanted to vent to Keith. She entered his room and he was nowhere to be found. The next day, Duchess Clays handed Rena a letter. It read, I can't endure the obligations of being the Duke's successor any longer, so I'm running away from home. Please don't search for me, Keith. Neither of the two could believe it, but the handwriting was definitely Keith's. The Duchess had heard from the servants he was seeming glum lately, particularly after talking to Katarina. And now that her mother mentioned it, Rena was starting to be convinced it was somewhat true. The Duchess then added the reason he ran away was because he was tired of babysitting Rena, and that looking after such a hopeless older sister for all these years must have exhausted him. But since he's such a kind boy, he couldn't come out and say he resented her, so he wrote that letter. The Duchess then said the only way Katarina could fix this was by apologizing to Keith and doing her best to never trouble him again. Rena then swore she'd find him. She first turned to Jord for help, but also had no idea where to start looking. Jord then brought them to Larna, who had made a teddy bear named Alexander that produces weird expressions. It can apparently track a person using one of their possessions. She then went through Keith's private possessions, a chest containing all the birthday presents she'd ever given him. She then brought it back to Larna, and handing the bear a handkerchief, he pointed the way to Keith's direction. The group on the mission consisted of Katarina, Jord, Maria, Sora, and Larna. They reached their first town, asking the townspeople if they'd seen Keith, but no one seemed to have information on him at all. Little Alexander would make all sorts of taunting faces at Rena, getting her irritated, but she could only now think of one thing: food. After eating, the group met back up with no leads from the rest of the team either. So, they continued their journey onwards, all while Keith woke up somewhere dark, shackled, and in pain. The last thing he remembered was shopping in town, until a woman he knew came out from an alley to ask him for a favor. Next to enter was Keith's older brother, Thomas Coleman, and a mysterious woman named Sarah. Thomas and the other brothers had always bullied Keith for being a mistress's son, but now Thomas was pissed that Keith lived his life as a higher-ranked noble, and he kicked Keith right in his body. They reached the next town, where Rena was immediately distracted by some weird trinket, so Jord ended up buying it for her, and as he was about to have a moment, Sora interrupted it. It seemed a certain someone had made a formal request to the Department of Magic to ensure Rena's safety, with the main objective of getting in Jord's way. At dinner time, Rena began to eat voraciously so she could have the energy to find Keith. However, she ate too much, saddened because Keith would have stopped her if he was here. That night, Larna used a device powered with wind magic to contact Raphael. Duke Clays had also been on the case, but unfortunately hadn't got any leads. And they haven't told Katarina despite knowing Keith's likely been kidnapped. The gang continued their search the next day with no results. Keith still sat chained up, wondering how long it's been. Sarah then entered to check in on him, acknowledging most people would normally go crazy after being trapped for days and subject to constant beatings. Thomas had apparently given her orders to bring Keith through the lowest rungs of society, so she's come here to make him a test subject for dark magic. She then began casting her magic and sent him into the darkness. Rina suddenly woke up, thinking she had heard someone scream, so she decided to take a walk to clear her head. She found Jord, and he consoled her for feeling down about her brother. Then, Sora entered to interrupt their moment again. After they reached the town of Noir, Jord decided to head to a friend's place for help. Then, the team split up further with Katarina and Sora searching together. Sora never thought he'd be able to go on an adventure with Rina again, even bringing up the stone of promise that held both their eye colors. He then made his moves on Katarina, but she had no time for it, since they needed to find Keith. The team reconvened in the evening with no results once again, until Maria noticed a woman walking by with the aura of dark magic. Lorna chased after the women, but the alleyway was empty. At their inn, Maria was still shaking from the intensity of dark magic she witnessed. It was eerie and terrifying, like she'd never seen before. Elsewhere, Lorna got notice from Raphael that Keith had been in contact with his birth mother right before he disappeared. Then, Alexander spotted his target, so they had to act. Back at the inn, Lorna broke the news to everyone that Keith had been kidnapped after being in contact with his mother. The mother didn't remember anything and was most likely manipulated by dark magic. Alexander had pointed to a mansion on the outskirts of town, so the plan was to head there in the morning. Katarina spotted little Keith crying. She wanted to be there for him, but she phased right through. Waking up from her horrifying nightmare in tears, she promised to save him. They reached the dilapidated mansion that seemed oddly well guarded. Maria is terribly frightened, seeing a darkness that's enveloping the entire mansion itself. Instead of entering, Lorna decides to contact the magic department first. Reinforcements will arrive tomorrow. But Rina truly cannot wait that long, so with enough convincing, they all decide to head in as they are. Rina thanked Jord for being the first one to agree to going with her, and he laughed. Already knowing when she had that determined look on her face, there was no stopping her. He knew she would rush in to save Keith right away. She's always been the type that if someone was in need of help, she'd run straight toward them, even if it was more than she could handle. She's reckless, but he was fond of that part of her, because if he was captured instead of Keith, she'd rush to save him in the same way. He truly loved that part of her. They began enacting their plan. With an explosion setting off near the mansion, the gang found their opportunity to head in, while Sarah observed them. They rushed inside, with Sora taking out the first guard, and Jord defeating the second. Lorna defeated the third that snuck up behind them. Maria then spotted a door emanating darkness, and heading inside, they found Keith's older brother passed out. Thomas woke up, uttering how Keith should die. Thomas was once the heir to the household of Viscount Coleman, but lost it due to his poor academic performance. He was eventually stripped of his status and thrown out of his family. One day, he spotted Keith, who lived a happy life adopted by the Clays family, and couldn't stand it. That's when Sarah approached him. He wanted Keith to fall even farther than he did. He wanted to send Keith to the depths and watch him crawl around pathetically. But no matter how much he tortured Keith, Keith wouldn't succumb, only making Thomas look more pathetic. Sora then opened a bookcase that led to the room where Keith was kept. The dark magic surrounding him was so clear, everyone could see it. Lorna warned Rina not to go any further, but she decided to anyway, and was relieved to discover Keith was still alive. The only way they could break the spell was to have the caster undo it. So, Lorna, Sora, and Maria decided to hunt after them. Inside the void, Keith could only hear the voices of his original family calling him a mistress's son and a monster. He felt unwanted. He felt like the child nobody needed, not by his mother or stepbrothers. Rina and Jord were begging for Keith to wake up. He didn't deserve this. He was so thoughtful and kind to everyone. Then suddenly, the trinket Rina had gotten earlier began to glow, and converted the darkness around Keith into silly black snakes she could pull apart. Keith then began waking up from the darkness to Katarina's voice, and began to remember Duke Clays, and his new family who took him in. He found his one light. Even with the darkness consuming him, he crawled towards it. Thinking of his friends who were so precious to him, he kept moving. Thinking of his sister he wanted to stand by forever, he stood up, not willing to let himself disappear in this place. Keith finally woke up, wiping Katarina's tears of relief, to give her not one, but 2 kisses, and then pass out, thinking it was all a dream. Then, Rina and Jord heard the sound of a dog barking, and some of the residual dark magic turned into exactly that, a little puppy. that hopped onto Rina and licked her right away. Sarah then appeared, calling Rina an interesting person. She had apparently been playing with dark magic to hopefully summon a familiar, but it seems Rina had won it over. She then scared Rina by suddenly appearing behind her, but she questioned how Rina had taken the familiar despite not having dark magic. She also knew Katarina's name for some reason, but couldn't stay longer and disappeared. The rest of the gang made it back to see the little puppy running around. As they headed home, Jord wasn't going to stand for what Keith did to her earlier, so he kissed Rina to make up for it. Arriving back home, Rina decided to play with her familiar, whom she named Spot. Anne was concerned, but apparently Larna said it'd be fine. Rina even tried giving Spot away to the Department of Magic at first, but he refused to leave Rina, so she had to keep him. He also didn't need food and could rest within Rina's shadow. Later, Rina visited Keith, who had just woken up, but things got a little awkward, with her remembering he had kissed her, and he was embarrassed that it wasn't just a dream, but he wasn't going to let this moment escape. He then confessed he loved her ever since they were kids, and that's when the friends came in to interrupt, all to all fight over Katarina. Susanna brought Jeffrey Keith's kidnapping report. Turns out, it wasn't orchestrated by his older brother Thomas, but instead Sarah, who had manipulated him with dark magic. She's believed to be involved with Marquise Deek's family. Turns out, there were other experiments of dark magic other than Raphael and Sora, and nearly all of them were orphans or purchased children, with one standout girl who had black hair in particular. Jeffrey then inquired on how Katarina was able to undo the dark spell on Keith. Then, Susanna presented the magic item she had bought, and since Rina tamed a familiar, it gave Susanna an excuse to admit her into the Department of Magic. In the school auditorium, Jord delivers their graduation speech, and Rina is somewhat sad that it's the end of their student life. However, the only memories she really has is of eating food, and at the graduation party, all she can stare at is steak, roast beef, cake, and jelly. Keith warns her that there's still a party at the castle tonight, so she shouldn't go overboard. Later, Katarina's parents congratulated her, and her mother even teared up, so glad because she had given up on the possibility Rina would graduate. Reaching the party at Jord's castle, Rina became awestruck with the food again, and the next to congratulate her was Ian, Jeffrey, and their fiancés. Jord then stepped in to ask for a dance, and as the two danced away, Rina thought of him as a beautiful and elegant prince that everyone admired. She was surprised someone like him would fall for her. After Jord did some flirting, Keith let him know he had another guest to attend to, and took his opportunity to dance with Rina. Then, Nicole wanted his chance, and everyone behind him began to fall to the ground in his presence. After the exhausting dances, Rina decided to grab a bite to eat, and with Alan coming to greet her, she offered him a little bite. He didn't want any, so she began rapidly eating, which broke him into laughter. She didn't like him making fun of her, assuring him the food was just that good, and fed him a piece, making him blush. Then, Mary and Sophia came rushing in, wanting Rina to feed them too. That night, Rina came to visit Keith's guest room to show off her pajamas, making Keith lose it since they were alone together. He threw her on the bed, since it seems she'd forgotten how he feels about her. But she didn't. She just thought with him acting normal lately, that it must have been another dream. Keith wants her to be more aware of him from now on, so he gives her a light kiss on the forehead and kicks her out. That night, the four girls chatted, and Rina asked Maria what kind of person her type was. Maria described someone who's always smiling, shines like the sun, and truly enjoys eating the sweets she makes. Then, Mary bursts in, saying she likes a person who is energetic, cheerful, and has brown hair and blue eyes. Very oddly specific. They then asked Katarina's type, but she personally hadn't thought much of it in detail. Rina then suddenly found herself in a familiar room, and it was her best friend, Achan's. She saw Achan playing Fortune Lover 2? And Rina was shocked to see a sequel. It featured Sora and 3 other conquerable routes, and Achan sighs, knowing Katarina the Villainess joined the department just to torture the protagonist again. Maybe she'll get a punishment worse than exile this time. Man, Rina just can't catch a break. Rina then woke up screaming next to all the girls from her scary dream, but after they calmed her down, she didn't think much of it. Later, she and her friends tended to her farm, which was going to be handed to Ginger since Rina wouldn't be a student here any longer. Afterwards, Raphael and Sora greeted 2 new members to the department, Katarina and Maria. But Rina broke into a sweat, meeting their senior department members, Cyrus Lanchester, head of the Mana and Magic Research Section, and Dewey Percy, two of the conquerable characters from her dream.
A carriage makes its way across a bridge, reaching past the eloquent gate. The daughter of a duke, Lady Katarina Clays, arrives gleefully at her destination. Her personal maid, Anne, sighs. Despite knowing Katarina wanted to do as she pleased since graduating from the Magic Academy, she wished Katarina maintained a behavior more befitting of a dame. Katarina assured Anne there was nothing to worry about, saying, "I will act properly in front of others." Soon, she'd be a full-fledged member of society. Anne suddenly gets startled by Pochi, and even though he wants to play, Katarina reminds him he isn't supposed to jump out from her shadow whenever he wants. She tries telling him, "House," over and over, but he just happily pants while staring at her. He then runs off, just because, and the chase begins. Rina gets herself caught in some bushes. Not good. She's been eating too much recently. She gets herself out and wanders until she spots Pochi hopping under a door. The door then opens itself in a somewhat unnerving manner. Walking inside, Rina tries to be polite as she searches for her dog through the dusty halls. She finds a storage room and squeezes through tight spaces between furniture until she finds Pochi barking happily. As she's about to begin her light scolding, a bright glowing bird appears before her. She manages to catch it as it dims its shine, not knowing one of its feathers has alerted a mysterious man from another kingdom. Rina showed the fat little bird to Prince Jordo while explaining what happened. That's when Mary, Alan, Sophia, Nicole, Maria, and her brother Keith would all butt in, all with their questions about the bird in the abandoned castle. One thing they for sure agreed on was the fact that this bird was unordinary, possessing a unique shape. Jordo reminded all of them he only called for his fiancée Rina, to which Mary would laugh at, saying, "I will not let you get ahead of us." His brother Alan added it was more fun being with everyone, and of course, the other four agreed. Jordo then asked Rina what she intended to do with the chick. She couldn't leave it by itself, and asking the little birdie if it wanted to stay with her, it chirped happily. She would later feed Pio, telling him to eat a lot and grow big. Pio's the name she gave him, since he chirped Pio Pio. Makes sense. The next morning, Rina was hard at work, heaving and hoeing her garden. She would try to pet cute little Pio while it ate, but it smacked her hand away. Her mother jump-scared her, whispering her name from behind. The thunderous scolding began. Duchess Clays heard all about the bird from Keith, and she was here to tell her daughter that taking care of it was unbefitting of a noblewoman. As Rina defended her bird, she pleaded for consent from her father, and he was more than happy to let her keep it, much to his wife's dismay. That's when he smoothly hit her with, "Katarina is a very kind girl, just like you, honey." Coddling her, she sobbed in lament, shouting her daughter was still as uncontained as a monkey. Pio would spend his days playing around the Clay's estate, eventually earning the Duchess's approval, going everywhere with Rina, even sleeping with her. While on the same evening, another bird was tracking Pio, flying back to the man from earlier. His friend next to him was glad to hear they were able to track the sacred beast, because once they found it, they'd be another step closer to being free. Jordo met with his older brother Ian, who explained Mutrock's carriage would be arriving at the castle earlier than expected. Jordo expressed concern, since their eldest brother, who was supposed to deal with them, was absent. We learned from Ian that Mutrock and Sorcier have never engaged in diplomatic relationships before, and he was counting on Jordo to welcome the envoys. Riding in carriage, Rina would try to grab Pio only for him to dodge her affection. She and Anne would then spot the caravan, and since the tent's shapes were uncommon, Anne surmised they might actually be people from outside of Sorcier. Rina tried to beg Anne to let her visit the shops, even using Pio, saying he wanted to see them too. The pleading eyes worked, and so they went to see the foreign merchants. Rina marveled over the shops. There were so many wares she'd never seen before. Pio fixated on a particular bird statue. The vendor explained that it depicted their country's guardian deity. It was no surprise Rina had never heard of this deity, or the country of Mutrock before. After all, the country existed far from Sorcier, and it didn't do any foreign trade either. Rina would soon be captivated by a dance performance, until Pio flew off her shoulder. The bird wandered into a tent, where upon finding him, Rina would stare in horror, seeing a chained tiger right next to Pio. As the tiger slowly encroached towards the little bird, he would get saved by another bird, landing in the palm of the mysterious man sprinkled throughout the different scenes, Akil. Calming his tiger, Rina would quickly explain she wasn't suspicious and that Pio was her bird. She was impressed by Akil's connection to animals. Her words would seem to catch him off guard, as he muttered that animals were smarter than they seemed. Pio seemed to like him too. Hearing he was going to put on a performance with the animals soon, Rina got excited. She wanted to see it. With her up in his face, he told her to do what she wanted, and she cheered in jubilation. One of the performers came in, speaking with a manly voice. This confused Rina, but the performer explained it was just how his top made him look. Kumit was a prodigy dancer. Rina would try to take Pio back, but the little bird turned away, causing Kumit to laugh, commenting that Akil seemed to seduce every animal. After Akil handed Pio back to Rina, she thought about how his beautiful smile could seduce anyone. It was strange. She felt like she'd met him a long time ago somewhere. That evening, presenting his full name as Shibab Akid Akil Halif, he was the man in charge of the circus, and he expressed it was an honor to be welcomed to Sorcière by Prince Jordo and Ian. He apologized for arriving early and presented a special proposal on behalf of their country. In came the beautiful princess Wahida Mutrak, and as proof of friendly relations, she's come to offer her hand in marriage to the royal family of Sorcière. The next day, the four main girls sat together, excited to attend the show Rina got the invitation to. They watched the incredible musical performance by the circus that featured a flashy choreographed tale from their homeland. Then, a performer placed a crown on Rina's head, and Akil would capture her and swing away on his rope. The stage would shine on only the two of them, where the performance continued as the lyrics played the lines, "Ever since we first met, it was you, my fated goddess." I'm not trying to get copyright claimed here, so just imagine the beauty in this music. The performance continued with Rina being surrounded by the dancing cast and everyone cheered. Afterwards, the girls were invited to the after-performance banquet as a thank you to Rina for helping the performance being more exciting. Akil apologized for pulling her in out of nowhere, but she was fine with it. The friends exchanged greetings with him, and he was short and brief with his words, shortly leaving to take care of his animals. Kumit would then come by to tell them not to take it personally. Akil was just the unsociable type. The three were then surprised to learn Kumit was a guy, but for Sophia, a cross-dresser like him was her dream. Rina had to calm her down. They ate their fill, with Rina being a pig with a full plate like usual. We learned most of the troop consisted of orphans, and they were not free to travel as they pleased. They were deployed to this country on a mission, and Mutrak's king took most of their earnings. While everyone enjoyed themselves, Rina noticed Akil smiling at her from outside the tent. Rina went after him, and seeing Pio going to nuzzle him immediately, she compared animals loving him as if he could communicate with them. He explained that for some reason, as long as he could remember, he's been able to communicate with animals. Rina was amazed, and this really surprised him. Normally, when he talked about stuff like this, most people laughed at him and didn't take him seriously. Rina felt a little jealous. She wished she could talk to Pio. Akil then explained the little bird was grateful for her, but even knowing that, Pio still wouldn't accept her outward affection. Akil then told her to pet from below. That's exactly where Pio liked it. Rina then stared intently at Akil, asking if he'd been to Sorcière before, but he told her he hadn't. Back in the tent, Akil would tell Kumit about how it was easy to open up to Rina. He had the same feelings for her as he had with animals. She felt honest, with no ulterior motive. The sappiness didn't last long, because the ominous red-eyed crow signaled it was time to make their move. The next day, Jordo would coerce Keith into escorting the envoys for Mutrak. He explained their wish for matrimony with royalty, but he was of course Katarina's fiancé. Meanwhile, Keith was a high-ranking noble with no fiancé to speak of, so he could make a good distraction for them. Nicole walked in as Jordo was leaving. He apparently had also been assigned to a task by the prince, since the sudden arrival of the envoys was suspicious. Nicole and Keith did their best to keep the princess busy, despite her constantly asking for time with the prince. By evening, the two boys were still suspicious of the envoys, wondering what their true goals were. The next day, Rina would visit Akil, saying Pio was head over heels for him, really wanting to see him. Akil didn't quite understand that expression, since it didn't exist in Mutrak. So, Rina described it as, when you loved and cherished someone so much, it made you bring out a huge smile. Lanyom is the word for it where he was from. She then asked him about his favorite animal, and quietly thinking about it, he answered that while he loved all animals, birds were his favorite. Rina speculated on why. When you're having a bad time, seeing a bird flying in the sky freely can make you feel at ease. He was surprised she had those times too, and she answered of course she did, but she was blessed by the good people around her. Her dad was kind, and her mom was a bit naggy, but taught her lots of things. Her younger brother was reliable, and so were the friends she introduced him to the other day. She cut herself off, realizing she was beginning to ramble, and asked about his family. He answered that he barely kept in touch with the people who were blood related to him, But thanks to that, he was taking care of things here. The troop was his precious family. As he took his leave, she asked if he'd visit again, but he couldn't make any promises. They had to get ready for the next journey as well. This made Rina and Pio a little sad, so he cheered them up by saying they still had a few days left. Staring through the eyes of the crow that watched him, we see a vision of his father, the king, telling him he was the only one in their lineage who had a power that shed so much blood, and that power would now be dedicated to the country. Akil, the third prince of Mutrak, was worked to the bone by his father, even before he became conscious of the world around him as a child. For his mother, playing around took precedence over her children. Only those who wanted to use him as a tool would try to cuddle up to him. In his eyes, people were scary and untrustworthy. That's why he closed himself off to others, until he received a blessing from heaven. He saw a true performance that left him in awe, and from there, he started spending time with them, learning human kindness for the first time. He got to know what it meant to have something important and precious. He was even able to laugh from the bottom of his heart. That's why he'd protect them no matter what. Keith was shocked, hearing Rina had been spending time with the troop's leader. Nicole warned her not to reveal her true identity to them, since they seemed to have some kind of ulterior motive. After a piano performance, the princess would close in on Alan, trying to work her charms. But he wanted her to give him a little space. He didn't know how to keep assertive women like her busy, but luckily, he'd be saved with Mary's arrival. Learning he had a fiancé, the princess excused herself for the day. Heading back home, Sophia spotted Rina, so they rode a carriage back home together. Rina couldn't help but ponder on Akil's identity. In her previous life, she remembered Achan showing her a new ultimate she recommended. Achan's #1 husbando was the familiar-looking guy on the cover, who had a pretty sad past until he met the main character. But Rina covered her mouth. She didn't want any spoilers. Upon getting home, Rina began playing immediately. Getting to his route, she shed a tear, because the life he lived was so cruel. The game she played was another spin-off to Fortune Lover, this one called In Search of Tomorrow, and she put together that Akil was the main love interest. She opened her journal, jotting things down in an attempt to remember the plot. The protagonist, Diva, was a very lively girl, brimming with curiosity, who was raised in an orphanage. When she turned 15, she wanted to know the origins of her birth, so she joined a troupe that came to her town, and they set out on a journey. It's a story of developing romance with the troupe's members while being on an adventure. Akil was one of the characters you had to romance, and he was an aloof hottie. In his devastating past, he was part of Mutrak's royal family who could control animals, but amongst them, his power was outstanding. However, he grew up carrying the burden of loneliness and sadness. But after meeting the people of the troupe, he learned what love and family meant. And once he learned this love, his father, King Mutrak, ordered him to go to Sorcière. His mission was to bring back the sacred beast that was taken from Mutrak a long time ago. He succeeded, and they returned to the provinces. However, the royalty of Mutrak could not control the beast because of a curse placed on it. The king ordered Akil to take the beast under his control in a fight so dreadful it took part of his lifespan. And he eventually succeeded in that, too. But to keep the beast a secret, the king executed the troop members. Akil's last remaining friend, Kumit, was allowed to live, but he self-ended, not wanting to burden Akil. This is what drove Akil to release the sacred beast to raise the kingdom. Rita now figured they were at the point in time before Akil captured the beast. She needed to figure out how to stop the events from unfolding, and so, the Inside Katarina's Brain Committee commenced, discussing how to avoid Akil's doom flag. All 5 of her remaining brain cells agreed that they'd save Akil, even if it meant going against the dev's intended design. We're 2 seasons plus a movie past intended design. All the cast is in love with her. Her thought train would be interrupted by Keith knocking at her door, but she'd ignore him to continue thinking about where the sacred beast was being kept. She would suddenly shove him out, to continue consulting with her mind. But no matter what she tried thinking about, she wasn't getting any closer. Before she even knew it, she suddenly found herself at a dining banquet. Keith now figured she hadn't listened to a word he said, and explained they were invited to the Mutrak envoy's welcoming party. She continued to munch as she thought about how both she and Akil hadn't revealed their true identities to each other. And that's when Jordo would introduce Akil to Katerina as his fiancée. Akil treated the greeting casually, as if never having met her before, even though she was stiff and nervous. With Akil excusing himself and taking his leave, Rina made her excuse to go to the bathroom. Finding him outside, he sternly questioned if she intended to spy on his troop the entire time, but she assured him it was all coincidence. He, however, wasn't going to take the prince's fiancée coincidentally showing up to the caravan as coincidence. But she would try to reason that she went to town often to play, eat, and buy lots of romance novels. Akil would stop moving once he heard she went to a farm village and that she gardened as a hobby. He then asked why she hid her identity, and she answered he would have worried too much about it. She thought that it'd be too mean. He then scratched his head, feeling he was getting dumber trying to be more on guard with her, and accepted, trusting her from now on. Sitting down to chat, he'd freak out a little, hearing Rina explain she had a dream where him taking the sacred beast would cause calamity. She would try using the excuse she had magic dreams that could see the future, but he'd stop her, knowing the crow was watching. Inside, he took this magic dream thing seriously, asking about it, and Rina played along, not willing to give the full details of him destroying his kingdom. He somehow trusts her enough to admit he's a prince of Mutrak, whose parents felt like strangers to him, and his true family was the troop. He would even sacrifice himself to set the troop free. This brought Rina to tears. Despite his affection and devotion to his chosen family, she knew his fate. She tried to hint at the idea that his father wouldn't keep his word about freeing the troop once he completed his mission. But right now, they were under the surveillance of his father's crows. If it looked like he was going to betray the king, they'd be disposed of. Taking his leave, telling her to give up on him, she stopped Akil, begging him to give up his mission. He turned to wipe her tears and hold her close. He was thankful that she was thinking a lot about him. Hearing she hadn't told anyone about her dream, he told her to keep it a secret. Regardless, he couldn't stop what he was here to do. Later, Rina would continue to think of ways to save Akil and his troop. She'd be alerted by Pio's squawking. He signaled and pecked at her to read the book he was standing on. Reading the lines, "A cursed dragon and a savior girl," she gasped and ran back to her notes, remembering the beast was cursed and that the protagonist of the game lifted the curse and saved Akil's soul. Then, in the end, he became friends with the sacred beast. She was overjoyed, realizing that was all she needed to do. She had to thank Pio for helping her reach the answer. She began to get serious with her 5 only brain cells. Assuming the beast was cursed by dark magic, she tried remembering the last part of the game where the curse was lifted. Her imagination was pretty childish, but what she ultimately got was that the protagonist of the game was a light mage, so she could count on her reliable friend, Maria. She still had concerns about putting Maria in danger, and decided it'd be best to just ask her friends what she should do. Stepping outside on the balcony, with the expression of a villainess, she declared she'd crush this curse. Meeting with Kumit, Akil warned him not to get too careless. Otherwise, they might suspect he wasn't actually a Mutrak princess. Hearing Akil say they'd be infiltrating tonight, Kumit felt relief, knowing once they succeeded, they'd finally be set free. He wanted to go to the northern countries and experience pretty white snow during the winter. Explaining the situation to her friends, they somehow believed her about everything. The whole sacred beast and Mutrak would be destroyed deal. They thought her story was too specific for her to be making it up. But when asked where she heard this, she told them it came to her in a dream. Alan sighed. Again? Sophia brought up that things Rina dreamed about have come true before. She begged for her help, and they agreed to find where the sacred beast was kept and discuss it with Akil. All the while, he found the old castle from the beginning of the movie, and inside, he located the box. He hesitated, remembering Rina's worry for him, but chose to grasp it anyway. The others would be alerted that Akil was missing. That's when Raphael would enter, letting them know he knew where Akil was. Akil was making his escape with Viscount Marlette, who was pulling an inside job in Sorcière. This man was eager to get his reward from Mutrak's king. Their wagon stopped because one of the watchbirds was disturbed. While Akil went to investigate the cause, Marlette was eager to see what treasure the king wanted. Opening the box, a light shone and he shouted. Akil found Marlette on the ground as the wagon burst open with a dark aura. First, spawned feet, then wings, then evil-looking eyes. Akil was at a loss. He heard the legend say it was supposed to be a golden bird. The monster shrieked, and when Akil tried to calm it down, it sent a destructive blast that he barely evaded. He didn't understand why the beast was in so much pain, so Sora came by to say it was cursed. He then explained he was a friend of Rina's, and had a gist of what was happening. Dark magic was tormenting this bird. Seeing the bird was about to fly off and attack the city, Akil ran and latched on, attempting to stop it. Back where the rest of the group was, they got the details of Akil's escape with the Viscount. Marlette was the noble who handled mediation between Mutrak and Sorcière, and it did seem like he was trying to curry favor with Mutrak's people. Rina couldn't sit back knowing their country was in danger now. She began making her way with her group behind her. And there, Kumit and the troop came up to apologize for deceiving them. The group was shocked to find out the princess was actually a guy, but he was quickly forgiven so that they could all work together. While their carriage reached viewing distance of the beast, Rina spotted Akil hanging onto it for dear life. She could see he was trying to stop it, but getting nowhere. Pio came out and squawked adamantly. Rina assumed he was going to get the beast's attention, and so she stood atop the carriage, raising Pio up and almost falling over. The beast turned its head to look their way and began flying their direction. Getting aggro, Rina had the driver start heading towards the lake. The beast caught up from behind and shot a barrage of blasts that the driver somehow managed to dodge. Arcus then hopped from the top, brandishing her blades to slice apart a tree trunk heading their way. Rina applauded, unfortunately causing her to tumble out of the carriage, where she'd barely be saved by the twins and Kumit, getting pulled back inside in a dramatic fashion. They made it across the bridge, only to finally get hit. The beast flew right above them, and unfortunately, the troop and driver were completely knocked out. Rina caught the beast's attention and began to run by herself. The monster readied a deadly attack that had been countered by Jordal's fire magic. The prince came just in time to save his fiancée and take her away. They made their way down to the lake, where Ian, Alan, and Mary casted torrents of water to freeze and encase the bird. Akil would fall off, but be saved by Keith's earth doll. The beast then broke out, but would then be shot down by Nicole, Raphael, and Sophia's tornado, then be encased with an ice again. The friends regrouped. Then Maria used her light magic in combination with Akil's to calm the creature down. Last second, he felt a pulse, and the beast unleashed a destructive blast throughout the area. Rina woke up to Pio squawking, and with everyone else knocked out, it was only her and Akil left. Holding the beast back with everything he had, Rina came to his side. The two would get blown back and be saved by the troop. And in this small moment where Akil coughed up blood, Rina would tell them if he kept going, this could cost him part of his lifespan, and that to set them free, he was going to sacrifice himself and become the king's tool. Kumit couldn't understand. He thought they were doing this so they could all be free together. But Akil felt he didn't have another choice. He felt he had to repay them for accepting a troublemaker like him. Kumit wouldn't accept this. Akil wasn't the only one who had a debt to repay. None of the troop could read a single letter, and the one who taught them along with etiquette was Akil. He was the only person who treated them like family. Akil was the one who told Arcus she should be proud of her swordsmanship skills. It was thanks to him she always did her best. The twins thought their parents abandoned them because they were bad kids. They closed themselves off and lived in their own world. But Akil was the one who told them that wasn't true and that they were good. They all wanted him to stay. They'd then be pushed back, and Rina heard a deep, manly voice say, "The chains on my right leg." Rina spotted the binding chains cursing the beast. Pochi then popped up in front of her, and she now figured he was telling her he could help. Rina, Pio, and Pochi ran towards and jumped onto the beast, along with Akil. The beast soared off, and Akil would keep them from falling. Then, with Akil restraining the beast as best as he could with his magic, Pochi and Pio would jump towards the chain, chopping it and setting the beast free. Would get blown back, and Akil would go after her, grabbing her and pulling him into his body. They'd then get rushed by golden plumage, and Rina would wake up to Pio, pecking her as she took in the view of the golden field. She'd find Akil and remark it was beautiful. This was no field, but instead the golden bird, Mazrul, restored to his former glory. Mazrul thanked them and explained that in his past, he had a kind friend who became the king of Mutrak. He actually looked a lot like Akil. He shared his power with his friend and helped him guide the country. But when he died, Mazrul tried to take his leave of the country, only to be restrained by those who remained. We then learned the beast had been beside Rina the entire time. Pio was a part of him. The day she woke him from a long sleep, he was able to release part of himself outside. Pochi actually undid a part of the seal during that instance. Pio then snuggled up to Rina, saying it was fun being with her, and she teared up, saying she felt the same. He then flew off and returned where he belonged as they rode off into the sunrise. Mazril explained he knew the situation the troop was in, and thus took away Mutrak's power to let them control animals. The troop was finally free. Now their dream to travel the world could come true, and the beast wanted to join them. He's grown to like Akil, and took a smaller form that'd be less conspicuous. Later that day, the group said their farewells to the troop. Mazrul then informed Rina that his existence would surely become a reason for conflicts, and in order to prevent that, he'd be erasing everyone's memories of his and the troop's time here. Rina cried. She didn't want to forget them, but Akil assured her it wouldn't all be gone. He'd never forget her. After all, he promised to come see her again someday. After wiping her tears, Rina tried to quickly get out that in her dream, she saw Akil's soulmate on another continent. But he'd shush her, saying he already found her, whispering in her ear, "Let's meet again, my Lenyon." She squealed, getting caught off guard, ruining another male lead's potential relationship. Saying their goodbyes, the golden feathers fell, and shortly, Rina would wonder what she was doing here. The friends reminded her they said their goodbyes to Mutrok's envoy, and with the golden feather falling into her hands, she smiled as she followed them behind. As Akil's group traveled across the flowery fields, Mazrul told him not to be so gloomy. He left a mechanism behind that would restore Rina's memories once they talked again. This was his special gift for Akil, and Akil vowed to see her again someday. Wow, not a bad ending for this movie. I would have preferred a third season, but this is okay. What do you guys think? Subscribe for more content, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.